Chapter 321. Cannon Fodder. The role of the wave controllers was in no way lesser than that of the duelists. Sansa and Cerys had taken on that burden, and they had helped immensely. But they suddenly halted when an unexpected variable appeared behind them. From the west, another army emerged, nearly larger than the first that attacked from the east. When did they flank us like this? The rear line only had Sansa, Cerys, the mages, and Emilia Aderix, the healer. So letting another army get close to them was a disaster waiting to happen. And all of them realized it immediately. Let's hit them from range while the others pull back. Cerys spoke as Sansa nodded hastily. Both of them manifested spears of ice and shadow, ready to launch a counterattack. But they froze the moment they saw what was coming. From afar, hundreds of fire projectiles flew through the air like catapult volleys, all aimed directly at the spot where Sansa and the others had gathered. At the same time, the battle cries of the new army rang out clearly. Charge! Kill them all! Those roars echoed in unison with the relentless firebombing raining down on their heads. They had made a grave mistake, assuming the Second Army consisted of mindless ganado. But their new opponents were the real deal. The sudden bombardment launched by the Ultra's own wave controllers caught the princess and her group off guard. And in that instant, everyone at the front line finally understood what had prompted Frey's desperate warning moments earlier. Shit! Several of them cursed simultaneously, trying to retreat, only to find the number of ganado around them had surged dramatically out of nowhere, making it impossible to turn their backs. The only one still able to move freely was Phoenix, who burst into a streak of flame and dashed back immediately. But by then, it was already too late. From the front and from the rear, they were completely surrounded. The pursuit had turned into a war of extermination. Far from the battlefield, and simultaneously in another place, a breathtaking garden bloomed with every kind of flower imaginable. Birds chirped, and the sound of fresh water trickled gently from a nearby stream, adding to the serenity. At the heart of this peaceful scene stood a round white table, flanked by two elegant chairs. On the table rested luxurious porcelain teacups, arranged neatly beside a massive chessboard that took up the entire surface. As for the players, one was a beautiful blonde woman in a crimson dress. Her opponent, an older man in his 50s, wore a vintage suit, a tall hat, and round reading glasses, which he held delicately in one hand. This isn't very sportsmanlike of you, Beato, playing your opponent like this, the man remarked. Beatrice responded with a knowing smile. And why not? Don't tell me you're not impressed with my tactics? You used to praise them all the time. She gestured toward the chessboard, one that lacked the usual setup. The white side had only a few pieces left, while black had completely overrun the board. There, in that surreal space, the classic war tactic known as the hammer and anvil had been flawlessly executed. The white side was entirely surrounded. They took the bait. And now, they're trapped between my lovely little hammers, Beatrice said softly. The man nodded slowly. But you know that such a beautiful tactic means nothing in the end, don't you? Oh? And why is that exactly? He pointed toward the few remaining white pieces. It's the difference in quality. Beatrice nodded, her smile unfading, as if she had expected that answer all along. You're right. As she spoke, the smoke from the previous bombardment cleared, revealing Cerys and Sansa, who had raised a dome of ice and shadow that protected everyone from the rain of fire. Meanwhile, Phoenix had returned just in time to join them against the Second Army that had seemingly appeared from nowhere. This time, they were facing an intelligent enemy, not the mindless ganado. But despite its organization, the new army didn't contain any elite-level combatants. Well, you can't expect too much from cannon fodder, can you? Beatrice chuckled. And in perfect sync with her words, Phoenix tore through their ranks in a terrifying display of overwhelming strength. Cerys and the others could only watch him from behind, barely able to comprehend how that man could slaughter such a massive number of enemies without even blinking. The ganado, even if technically human, resembled zombies. Killing them was easy and required no hesitation. But the Second Army was made of people, flesh and blood. Still, this was war now, and in war, hesitation meant defeat. Even so, it wasn't easy getting used to killing humans. They're just children. They don't know the terror of the battlefield yet, Beatrice whispered, placing more and more black pieces on the board. We can teach them a valuable lesson thanks to the endless cannon fodder we have. And as if her words carried some kind of magical power, more enemies appeared, from the north and the south. More ganado. It was no longer just a hammer and anvil. Now there were 4 hammers, threatening to crush Fry and the others from all sides. All of this, and not a single member of the Ultra's elite had shown up yet. Just as Beatrice had called them. Cannon fodder. The middle-aged man let out a laugh as he observed her extreme chess strategy play out. I can't even call this chess anymore. You're absolutely heartless, Beato. Hehe. The man couldn't help but burst out laughing, taking his time before continuing. To do this to the very people you've lived alongside all these years. Oh. In response, Beatrice gave him a sweet and seductive smile, her voice playful. Well, I'm a witch, aren't I? What did you expect from me? That sweet smile swiftly twisted into something demonic. It runs in my blood. Back on the battlefield, overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemies, Fry Starlight clenched his teeth as he summoned the Dark Sister. Phoenix had said they shouldn't unleash too much power. To hell with that. At this rate, even if their enemies were weaker, they would be slowly worn down and exhausted. With that thought in mind, Fry charged forward, swinging his blade and unleashing devastating waves of dark aura, slicing the surrounding ganado into pieces. There was no way he'd allow himself to die in a place like this, not like this. And that same determination flooded the minds of every member of the elite class. Each of them found themselves fighting with everything they had, clawing for survival in the heart of that death trap. It was a desperate war through and through. Chapter 322. Beneath the Crow's Gaze 1. The chaos of war, death, blood, and despair. Experiences most people never face in their lifetime, yet the elite class lived through them that night. Amid the desolate sands of the Ultra's desert, those students, barely of age, fought for their lives. With the clash of blades, the tearing of flesh and bone, and the constant tension of battle, the pressure weighed heavily on them all. Fry, who single-handedly took on dozens of enemies at once, found himself wondering, "Can I save everyone?" But he quickly answered himself, "Of course not." The idea of a hero saving everyone was far from realistic, especially when the odds were stacked against them from the very beginning. Besides, Fry never considered himself a hero. All he wished for, amid the heart of this chaos, was for the few he truly acknowledged in his world to survive. Surrounded completely by enemies, he lost sight of his companions. His full focus was on the monstrous beings relentlessly trying to end him. For a fleeting moment, Fry imagined stumbling across the mutilated corpse of one of his friends. Rage boiled within him as the ceaseless wave of enemies obscured his vision and blocked his path. The only thing that reminded him he wasn't alone was the surging auras erupting all around the battlefield. Minutes passed in a blur, and for the first time, Frey's worst fears did not come true. Despite the encirclement the elite class endured, Fry and Snow tore through enemy lines from both flanks, while Demon and Danzo, clad in reinforced armor, stood unscathed. Together, the 4 of them completely secured the eastern front, allowing the rear line to finally breathe and focus on the enemies ahead. Meanwhile, Ghost moved silently through the battlefield, his deadly strikes sending more Ultras into their graves. Are we winning? Fry wondered as he finally caught his breath. In the distance, he caught sight of a blazing spectacle, Phoenix Sunlight's fireworks on the far side of the battlefield. Lord Sunlight did not hesitate to incinerate his foes alive, claiming the largest kill count that day. Behind him, everyone fulfilled their role flawlessly, despite the overwhelming pressure. Sansa Valyrian unleashed her shadows, covering a wide area with inky tendrils that shredded anyone who came close. Near her, Saris Moonlight conjured dozens of ice spears and blades, deadly at long range. But that wasn't all. The Moonlight Heiress dazzled when a crystalline ice armor formed around her lithe frame, covering key points of her body, giving her the appearance of an icy ninja. Wielding twin blades, Saris closed the distance and sliced through enemies with lethal precision, compensating for any weakness in her ranged attacks. The ice aura not only fortified her defense but drastically enhanced her speed. Incredible! Sansa stared in awe, stunned by the elegance and brutality of Saris' technique. She matched the durability of Demon and Danzo's armor with just her own power. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Saris Moonlight had pioneered a new combat style for wave controllers. Sansa couldn't help but admire her, but without realizing it, she let her guard down. And in battle, carelessness is deadly. She didn't sense the mutated human lunging at her from behind. Like a rabid zombie, he snarled and bared his filthy teeth, aiming for her neck. Sansa stepped back in panic, far too late to retaliate. All she could do was raise her arm in defense. Moments later, the creature's fangs sank deep into her skin, ripping flesh and spilling a flood of blood. Pain surged through her as she stared at the vicious bite mark along her elbow. Her retreat only invited more enemies, surrounding her in a tightening ring. Slash! The whistling wind saved her, a single strike beheading the monsters in an instant. "Are you all right?" Adriana appeared, clutching her wind-infused spear, worry etched on her face. Sansa stood quickly, forcibly sealing her wound. "No need to worry." With a flick of her hand, the shadow tendrils surged again, stronger, deadlier. "I'll slaughter every last one of them." The black serpents slithered and lunged like massive vipers, reducing anything within their range to shredded limbs. The assault shook the battlefield, but it wasn't enough. Then she stepped in. The Ultras never saw it coming. Arrows struck their skulls with pinpoint precision, ending them before they could even react. "Don't forget about me, scum." Perched on a high ridge with a full view of the battlefield, Lara Croft, granddaughter of the former headmaster, was in her element. She loosed arrow after arrow with terrifying speed, mowing down hordes of mutants with ruthless efficiency. Sansa was caught off guard when her wound began healing on its own, bathed in a gentle green light that had appeared from nowhere, wrapping around her body. Tracing the source of this pure, radiant energy, she spotted Saint Candidate Amelia Adderix stationed in the rear, behind both Lara and the Sunlight twins. Amelia's light didn't just reach Sansa. It swept over every member of the elite class in the vicinity, restoring vitality and clarity to their minds and bodies, allowing them to fight with renewed strength. The nearby presence of Dawn and Ragna contributed as well. The elite class had never trained to fight as a coordinated unit. Their formation was scattered, and Phoenix had failed to establish any real structure. But their individual power was more than enough to reverse the tide. Even when facing a massive army numbering in the thousands, their quality far outmatched the enemy's quantity. What began as a desperate struggle for survival turned into a complete annihilation of the Ultra-Res, who fell one by one. And after exactly 4 hours, for excruciating hours that felt like an entire day, it was over. The cawing of crows filled the air as they descended, feasting on the rotting corpses. The battlefield was thick with the stench of blood, scorched flesh, sweat, and decay. The scent filled their lungs. They had won. But none of their faces reflected joy or even relief, only exhaustion and a bitter, hollow emptiness. "Is everyone okay?" Phoenix asked. He still looked as composed as he had at the start. Truthfully, it wouldn't be wrong to say he had handled half the battle by himself. The elite class students gathered around him, some staggering, others more steady. Snow was the one to speak. "We're fine. We survived." "I'm glad to hear that." Phoenix let out a quiet breath. As the young lord of the Sunlight family, he had reached SS rank at an exceptionally young age. But he was used to fighting alone and had little experience in leading others. In that regard, his failure to manage the flow of battle was glaring. Fortunately, the raw strength of the strongest students had been enough to carry them through. Chapter 323, Beneath the Crow's Gaze, 2. What now? Ceres Moonlight asked. Phoenix paused, analyzing the situation before responding. For now, we need to leave before reinforcements arrive. But... He cast a glance across the battlefield, now littered with corpses, and the crows that had found a lavish feast. You're thinking of looting the bodies, aren't you? Professor Phoenix, what happened to your manners? Aegon chuckled from behind the group, calmly cleaning his sword. Like Phoenix, he looked untouched by the battle. Looting? Several students echoed, reacting in a mix of shock and discomfort. Some looked disgusted, hesitant. Others remained impassive. Overall, the idea of tampering with the dead was foreign to them, repulsive even. They had lived far from such grim realities. We're low on supplies. Right now, acquiring resources is a top priority. Food, clothing, weapons. Anything that could improve their chances of survival even slightly was worth securing. That was Phoenix's reasoning. But Aegon shook his head. It's pointless. Didn't you notice? We just fought the lowest scum of the Ultras, barely above animals. What valuables do you expect to find on them? He spoke with quiet certainty, never glancing up, his attention entirely on his now clean blade. Phoenix couldn't deny his point. The Ultra soldiers had indeed looked more like empty husks than thinking beings. Still, you may be right, but let me ask. How many did we fight here?
No idea.
You handled most of them yourself? Maybe a few thousand? Exactly. Thousands. I'm sure at least a handful had something useful. No one knew how long they'd be stranded in this foreign land. They were running dangerously low on resources. Something useful? Even if they had anything, you probably incinerated it with their bodies, Professor Phoenix. You're wasting your time. Aegon opposed Phoenix directly, as if this wasn't the first time they'd clashed on such a matter. Then 1 hour. What? We search for just 1 hour. Then we move. The battle had just ended, and lingering too long was unwise. Phoenix offered a compromise. Aegon sighed, closing his eyes. He could see Phoenix wouldn't back down. Do whatever you want. Everyone in the elite class had heard the exchange. To an outsider, it might have sounded like a conversation between equals. And yet the truly astonishing thing was that a B rank like Aegon could speak to someone like Phoenix, an SS rank, without flinching. Wherever he went, the prince commanded presence. The presence of a true king. It's settled then, Phoenix declared. Those of you still fit for battle will assist me in the search. I know this isn't something you're used to, but if we want to survive, we have to do what it takes. Phoenix addressed everyone, but most of them couldn't even bring themselves to meet his eyes. Despite their overwhelming victory, the truth was, it hadn't been easy. The students were in varying states. Snow and Fry still had enough strength to fight if needed, but what about the rest? They were utterly exhausted. Lara Croft could barely hold her bow anymore, her muscles worn and trembling from too many repeated shots. That alone said everything. I'll go, Fry said, unwilling to remain near the prince any longer. Looting corpses felt more bearable to him. Snow followed suit. We'll help too. Other than aura depletion, we're not really hurt. Selena volunteered as well, joined by the mage Xavier. We need to recover the magic traps we scattered across the battlefield anyway, so we can do both, Xavier added. Phoenix nodded and also called on Ghost, Danzo, and Demon to join them. Demon, however, refused. In the end, 7 of them stepped forward to retrieve what they could from the fallen, while the rest watched silently. How can they do something so vile? Saint Candidate Amelia said, sadness painting her face as she watched Fry and the others search the corpses with emotionless expressions. Ceres, standing nearby, shook her head. You're too innocent, Amelia. Am I the strange one here? Amelia asked, clinging to her beliefs. She had opposed Phoenix's proposal from the beginning, but lacked the courage to object out loud. At times like these, we do whatever it takes to survive. Look at them. We already killed them. What difference does looting their corpses make? They're dead either way. But what separates us from animals, then? Amelia's gaze shifted to the crows still pecking at the dead. There are boundaries given to us by the Lord of Light. Boundaries we must never cross. Her voice trembled, but her conviction remained unshaken. Saris didn't know how to respond. People like Amelia were the worst in these moments, convinced their beliefs were absolute, unwilling to bend no matter what. But the reply came from someone else entirely. What kind of drugs do they feed you at the church? It was Demon, clearly fed up with her moral outcry. What? Wake the hell up, you naive little girl, and try flipping the board for once. Put yourself in their shoes. Demon. Saris tried to stop him, but he pressed on. Let me make this clear to you. If the roles were reversed, they wouldn't just steal your body. They would take turns torturing you, over and over again, until your fragile little body was torn to pieces. His brutal tone left Amelia in stunned silence, mouth open, words failing her. Take your dumb sense of morality and toss it in the nearest trash heap. The only thing that matters in this world is survival. You can only afford to spout this crap because you're on the winning side. You and your entire church are nothing but hypocrites. For some reason, Demon looked even larger than usual as he shouted. Hi, Pokerites, Amelia murmured, right before Demon roared. Yes, hypocrites. A heavy silence followed. Then came the sound of soft sobbing. Demon's jaw dropped as Amelia suddenly burst into tears. Without warning, he had made her cry like a child. The girls nearby immediately gathered around to comfort her, glaring at Demon with disgust and contempt in their eyes. He scoffed, spat on the ground, and stormed off, flipping them off as he went. What kind of pathetic fools have I gotten stuck with? He muttered the words and disappeared, his muscular back fading into the distance. Far from the commotion between Demon and Amelia, Princess Sansa sat alone, staring at the field of corpses, specifically at Fry. He was rummaging through the dead one by one, his face blank, showing no emotion at all. I can't read him, Sansa muttered. She couldn't figure out what was going through his mind. Ever since his hair had turned white out of nowhere, she hadn't been able to read him like she used to, except in rare moments. Unless he lowered his defenses, it was impossible to see through him. His presence had become completely enigmatic, but for some reason, she couldn't tear her eyes away. He's good at handling corpses, she murmured under her breath, only for a sudden voice to interrupt. Yeah, like he's used to it. Sansa turned to find a familiar girl standing beside her.
Tlono.
Clanna Starlight, Frey's relative. The girl greeted the princess with a gentle smile. Chapter 324. Beneath the Crow's Gaze 3. Hello. Do you mind if I sit? Not at all. Thank you. Clanna sat beside Sansa, both of them staring at the field of corpses swarmed by crows. We're far from home. Yeah. Clanna chuckled softly, reclining against the solid rock she was using as a seat. If someone had told me yesterday that I'd end up here like this, I'd have called them insane. It's the worst fate imaginable. There was a deeper meaning behind Sansa's words, one that Clanna immediately picked up on. This is your second time here. Are you all right? Clanna asked gently, while Sansa kept her gaze distant and grim. The princess had no fond memories of this place. She didn't even know what the rest of the Ultras continent looked like, having spent most of her time imprisoned in a cell. But that didn't change the fact that she was back on the land where she once suffered. Of course it wasn't easy for her heart. I'm fine. Really? Clanna nodded at her response. Do you think we'll survive this time? The princess had survived once. But what about now? I don't know. I hope we do. Silence fell between them for a moment as their eyes returned to the bodies scattered before them, particularly one young man dragging a corpse, having found something useful in its pockets. I think some of us will survive. The strong ones at least, like you, Sansa, and Fry, standing over there. Sansa turned the moment Frey's name was mentioned. Tell me, princess, what does he mean to you? What? Sansa asked, a bit surprised by the sudden shift in the conversation. I'm talking about Fry. You were watching him the entire time. What kind of question is that, all of a sudden? Sansa asked as Clanna tilted her head, resting it on her knees. Call it curiosity. You're free to ignore it if you'd like. Sansa frowned. This wasn't the time or place for a question like that. What does Fry mean to me? Friend. That was the first word that came to mind. Having lived her entire life as a princess, always pursued by people looking to benefit from her status, Sansa had become used to reading hidden intentions. The manipulation and false smiles left deep scars during her childhood. She'd developed a strange ability to read faces. But Fry was the only one who approached her without hiding anything. He was rude, annoying, but he didn't try to use her. That alone made her consider him her only real friend. Still, things had changed since they entered the temple. He saved her, again and again. When everything around her fell into darkness and all hope faded, he was there. At some point, his presence had become as important to her as Oliver Kahn, her only other true ally. So what exactly was Fry to her? She wondered, recalling all their moments together. That brooding young man who always looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. Sansa Valyrian. Affection points. 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75. Someone I can't afford to lose. That was the answer Sansa came up with. And from the surprised reaction beside her, it clearly wasn't the one Clanna had expected. Seriously, why would you even ask something like that? Sansa spoke, finally turning to take a proper look at Clanna's face. Reading her emotions without even realizing it, her eyes slowly widened in surprise. Clanna, you... She was about to say something, but a terrifying scream tore through the air, sending the crows flying in panic. Everyone immediately turned toward the source, only to see the mage Xavier Adams writhing on the ground. Something latched onto him. That's a mutated human? Xavier, assuming all enemies were dead, had let his guard down, only to be ambushed by one of the mutants that had somehow survived. The creature sank its fangs deep into the young mage's chest. Xavier thrashed in agony, unable to muster enough strength to resist. Slash! With a blur of motion, Fry, who had been nearby, sliced the mutant's head clean off in a single strike, ending its assault. But the damage had already been done. The creature had bitten deep, infecting Xavier's chest with a strange, spreading black rot. He winced in agony as everyone rushed over, with Amelia at the front, healing him without hesitation. Idiot! Did he really drop his guard just because he thought they were all dead? Demon Valyrian scoffed, watching as everyone gathered around Xavier, while Amelia tended to his wounds. They're inexperienced. A sudden voice made him turn sharply. Ghost was standing behind him, still looting the corpses with cold efficiency, completely unfazed by the chaos behind him. Demon raised an eyebrow. He hadn't sensed anyone nearby. If Ghost hadn't spoken, he would have never realized the silent killer was there. Apparently, Ghost had assumed Demon's words were directed at him. Inexperienced. Demon sneered. When it comes to experience, I doubt anyone here has more blood on their hands than a filthy assassin like you. Ghost Umbra. Ghost remained silent. Demon chuckled. Tell me, Umbra, what do you think? Look at them. Who do you think will survive? And who's going to die? Ghost didn't answer right away. Instead, he finished stripping the nearby bodies, carrying out his task with disturbing precision. Then he walked past Demon until they stood shoulder to shoulder. Only then did the assassin speak. Death spares no one, Demon Valyrian. Whether they have experience like us, or none at all like them, no one truly knows how this will end. With a dark look, Ghost stepped past him, leaving behind a final remark. But if my instincts are right, the number of survivors here won't exceed the fingers on one hand. Demon couldn't help but laugh aloud, a chill running down his spine at Ghost's ominous words. What a cursed fate you're trying to place on us, Ghost Umbra. Between the crow's caws and Xavier's groans of pain, the hour set by Phoenix had passed, signaling it was time to move again, venturing deeper into enemy territory, into a continent that had been lying in wait all along. The tea party. In the midst of a beautiful garden, Beatrice leaned on one hand, gazing at the chessboard before her with a smile. The first round is over. The moment she finished her sentence, the man across from her, an older gentleman in his 50s wearing a tall hat, replied immediately, "With your loss." He sipped from his cup, savoring the variety of teas Beatrice had offered at her little tea party. Beatrice smiled calmly. Was it really a loss? I achieved what I wanted after all. At that, the man's sharp eyes narrowed. So the second round has already begun? Beatrice nodded, her smile soft but knowing. That's right. TCH. Just how long do you plan on dragging out this silly game? As long as possible, she replied cheerfully. You know how boring it gets around here. She truly looked entertained, like a 6-year-old who just discovered a new game to play for hours on end. Gavid Lindman won't be pleased when he hears about this. The moment his name was mentioned, Beatrice shrugged. Who cares what that pompous man wants? He won't be around anytime soon anyway. After kidnapping the Empire's most precious jewels, the Ultras were expecting a fierce response. It was only natural for their forces to mobilize, bracing for the all-out war the Empire would inevitably launch, a repetition of the war from 17 years ago. Only this time, the Ultras were the ones who lured the Empire in. Thanks to the looming conflict, Beatrice was free to toy with Fry and his companions however she pleased. The Eternal which observed the teenagers with deep interest and careful attention. She watched as bonds formed between them. Friendship, respect, love, hatred, rivalry. The elite class had become fertile ground for every kind of drama, and the witch enjoyed watching every bit of it. Her gaze reflected Fry and his comrades, from a place much closer than they ever imagined, and her grin widened. The second round begins now. Chapter 325, Womb of Ashes. Huff! Huff! Xavier Adams was panting heavily as Amelia worked to heal the festering wound in his chest. Holy energy truly was a blessing in situations like this. Its purifying touch cleansed the infection completely, allowing Xavier to breathe in relief. It's a good thing the wound didn't reach your heart. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to save you. Amelia exhaled and stepped back as the others made space for the mage to stand again. I'm sorry. I was careless, Xavier said, directing his apology to Phoenix. But he simply shook his head. It's fine. The responsibility is mine. Even though the elite class was made up of the best, at the end of the day, they were still just children, barely past puberty. Incidents like this were well within the realm of possibility. But Phoenix had failed to anticipate it. Standing a little behind them, Aegon Valyrian gave a quiet, knowing chuckle. He'd predicted this outcome, perhaps even expected it, but chose to stay silent. After all, despite being in the same crisis, the elite class was far from functioning as a true team. We'll halt the looting here. There's no point in continuing. Fearing another mishap, Phoenix decided to end the corpse scavenging operation. Everyone laid out what they had collected. The result was far from satisfying. What the hell is this filth? Danzo stared in disgust at the pile of rotten meat, dried herbs, and moldy mushrooms dumped in front of him. Ghost answered, "This is what those people were eating. Rotten meat, aged fungi, some of it poisonous, wild herbs not fit for consumption, and most of the water they carried was contaminated and unfit to drink." He paused for a moment, debating whether to share something else, but chose to keep it to himself. I don't know how they even had the strength to fight us. Like the prince said, we were up against walking corpses. It was almost comical how the intruders on this land, like Fry and the others, were in far better condition than its native inhabitants. But on the other hand, we did manage to salvage a few things: armor, clothes, weapons. They're all in horrible condition, but they might work for camouflage. Ghost gave his full report as he had looted more corpses than anyone else. so much so that a few students had been repulsed by how he tore through some of the bodies looking for anything remotely useful. As expected from an assassin like him, desecrating corpses wasn't something new. I see. Well done, Ghost Umbra. Phoenix sighed, trying to think of a way to make use of the limited gear they'd acquired. But overall, that hour spent scavenging had been almost entirely fruitless. As Phoenix examined the poor-quality weapons and clothing, a few students walked over to the pile of rotten meat and bones, visibly disturbed. How could anyone eat this kind of garbage? Jan Dover, one of the elite class members and formerly part of Faritha's entourage, picked up a chunk of meat, grimacing. Nearby, Fry raised an eyebrow as he glanced at Jan and his companion, Kyle. Amazing. You two are still alive. You! Jan was about to respond, but the words caught in his throat the moment his eyes met Frey's. Fry wasn't someone they could afford to mess with anymore. Even though he hadn't meant any offense, he genuinely thought they'd died somewhere along the way. Jan backed off and refocused on the meat in his hands. It looked like a shoulder cut, complete with bone. But its size didn't match any animal Jan could recognize, which led him to ask, "What kind of meat is this?" The moment he asked, Aegon laughed loudly, drawing everyone's attention. With a smile, Aegon pointed to the chunk. "Are you sure you want to keep holding that shoulder? Its original owner must have been cursed to end up like this." "What are you talking about?" Jan asked, confused, and Aegon sighed. "Seems like you forgot something in your report, Ghost Umbra, or maybe you left it out on purpose." Ghost remained silent, confirming Aegon's suspicion. "What you're holding is human flesh." The moment Aegon dropped that bombshell, everyone froze. 1 second of eerie silence. Then Jan screamed and hurled the meat away in horror. Human flesh! Disgust spread like wildfire through the group as the realization set in. Some had already suspected it. Among them, Snow Lionheart, who now looked thoroughly irritated. "You shouldn't have said that, Aegon." Snow muttered darkly, but Aegon simply shook his head. "There's no point in hiding it. Let them understand what kind of enemies they're facing. From the very start, they should have known what they were up against wasn't just other humans. What lay on this side of the world was far more sinister. And now, with the revelation of cannibalism, panic began to seep into the ranks of the elite class. Exactly what Phoenix had wanted to avoid. That's enough. Let's move." Now that Xavier Adams could move again, there was no reason to remain on the battlefield. In silence, everyone picked themselves up and departed, forming into separate groups, the largest of which followed Professor Phoenix. Among them, Fry walked alongside Ghost and Danzo. Snow wanted to join them, but too many people clung to him, forcing him to look back awkwardly. With each step, they passed the corpses of the transformed humans, zombie-like beings oozing black fluid from their wounds. "I wonder, how did they end up like this?" Danzo muttered absent-mindedly, puzzled by the strange black liquid seeping out of their bodies. "They're failed contractors," Ghost answered, and Fry nodded. "I thought the same. That black substance is corrupted demonic blood." There was no other explanation for what they were seeing. Danzo seemed unfamiliar with the concept, prompting Ghost, uncharacteristically patient, to explain further. A clear sign that he had changed. There are 2 types of demonic contracts. First-generation contracts grant a human dark aura directly from a demon, but the increase in power is minimal. Danzo nodded. That much he already knew. Then there are second-generation contracts, which involve injecting demonic blood directly into the human body. Second-generation contracts produced far stronger results, as demonic blood held terrifying power capable of mutating the human body to wield more potent aura types. However, despite its power, demonic blood is essentially poison to us. Naturally, not many survived the process. Those who did were elite, the backbone of the Ultras, but they were the minority. As for the rest, those whose bodies rejected the blood either died or, worse, turned into aimless, flesh-hungry creatures that roamed without purpose. The Ultras didn't hesitate to turn that many people into lab rats. "That's horrifying," This was why reconciliation had never been an option. Most people didn't realize how blessed they were to live behind the Empire's walls, protected from the horrors of the outer world. Fry said nothing. He already knew all of this. These details were part of what he'd once written into the novel. Even though the future had changed so drastically that the story was nearly irrelevant now, facts like these still aligned with the original land of survival he'd created. The group moved quietly, conserving their strength as much as possible. As they crossed the barren lands, silence fell, each person lost in their thoughts. The only sound was Xavier's occasional coughing, trying to catch his breath as Selena supported him. Despite his poor condition, he was the object of envy, being taken care of by such a beautiful girl. Fry, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking about the previous ambush. The way they had been cornered, how everything felt planned. It all made him wonder, was this just a game orchestrated by someone watching them? So what did that person want? And why hadn't they killed them yet? Even a fraction, no, just a sliver of the Ultra's true power would have been enough to wipe them out. So why hadn't that happened? Just what kind of chase were they caught in? The moment Fry asked himself that, he realized how little he knew, completely unaware that they were pawns in the Eternal Witch's game. Chapter 326, Third Generation Contracts. The march went on for hours. Hours spent on edge, bracing for an ambush that never came. Still, the fatigue built up slowly on most of them. They looked like they'd fought for weeks. Not a single day. Eventually, when they were at their limit, they stopped because, for the first time, they saw something that didn't belong to the endless wasteland. Am I hallucinating? Ragna Claude blinked, unsure if his eyes were deceiving him. Before them stood a city, its tall buildings made from jet-black stone resembling obsidian. It was still far away, but clearly visible. It's not an illusion. Phoenix placed a hand on Ragna's head, confirming what they saw. Everyone, get ready. We're blending in. At his signal, everyone pulled out the tattered clothes and black cloaks they had looted earlier, dressing in them one by one. Ugh! Some of the girls grimaced at the filthy clothing they had to wear, but none dared complain. The plan is simple. We blend in. Try to gather as much information as possible, especially about the teleportation gates. If we can get supplies, great. But don't engage with anyone. Keep your heads down at all times. Understood? Yes. The students answered in unison, prompting a nod from Phoenix. Good. Ghost Umbra and Prince Aegon will come with me. The rest of you stay back until we know what we're walking into. Phoenix had intentionally split the group, placing Snow and Fry among the rest of the students. Both of them were strong enough to fend off most of what the Ultras might throw at them. Meanwhile, he chose Ghost, the best in stealth, and Prince Aegon, highly intelligent, to accompany him directly. Phoenix's plan was sound, and no one objected, so the trio immediately set off ahead of the others. Thanks to their exceptional speed, it only took them a few minutes to reach the city's crumbling outer walls. Try to stay out of sight as much as possible. Both Ghost and Aegon nodded simultaneously. Ghost was about to suggest using his shadow manipulation ability to sneak in, but he stopped short as a strange realization struck him. Those walls are empty? There were no guards on the ramparts, no signs of life where the city's first line of defense should have been. Ghost questioned his senses, but Phoenix's reaction mirrored his own. I don't sense anything. An SS-ranked awakened like him couldn't be fooled easily. Ordinary people had no hope of escaping his perception. The fact that he sensed absolutely nothing confirmed it. Something was definitely wrong. Stay sharp. We're going in. Following Phoenix's command, they cloaked themselves in aura and lightly tapped their feet against the ground, launching themselves toward the top of the wall that separated them from the city beyond. Upon reaching the summit, the trio took a moment to process what they saw. The sun's rays bounced off the old obsidian-like walls, revealing the entire city in haunting clarity. The sight was majestic, yet the deafening silence was unsettling. This isn't what I expected to find here, Aegon remarked with a soft smile as he stepped forward. This place is completely deserted. With every step they took deeper into the land of the Ultras, things only grew stranger. It's too early to jump to conclusions. Phoenix moved forward with a stern expression, followed closely by Ghost and Aegon. Let's scout the area. There was no logical reason for a city of this size to be abandoned. It simply didn't add up. But no matter how hard they searched, the result was the same. It was a ghost town. This throws our entire plan out the window. It was like walking through an empty graveyard. There was nothing to give them even a sliver of hope. The land itself felt like a yawning abyss, ready to swallow them whole. We shouldn't have expected anything from this barren wasteland to begin with. Aegon spoke while slicing through one of the city's buildings, revealing its interior. A bare room with a rotting wooden table and a few broken chairs. How charming! As they wandered through the vacant streets, they found empty shops, scattered belongings, abandoned homes. It's as if everyone left at the exact same time. Aegon said aloud, earning a nod from Ghost, who was still investigating the scene. Not just that, it happened recently, very recently. From freshly extinguished campfires and recent footprints, Ghost reached a firm conclusion. I'd wager this city was fully inhabited less than 24 hours ago. You're saying they left just a few hours before we arrived? Phoenix asked, frowning, then froze as realization hit him. The army from before. Ghost nodded. We can't be 100% certain, but it's likely that army came from here. The wretched ones, those walking corpses who had eaten human flesh, had in fact emerged from this very place. But that makes no sense. Are we supposed to believe that those miserable fighters were the city's entire population? To their knowledge, cities weren't built like this. Where were the women? The children? No matter how they tried to reason it out, something crucial was missing from the picture. But they couldn't figure it out no matter how hard they tried. For now, let's continue exploring before we call the others. Even if it wasn't what they hoped for, the abandoned city was a decent enough place to set up a temporary base. But first, they had to confirm that it was truly empty. So they swept through the area methodically. Wherever they went, the result was the same. Empty homes, desolate streets. The only food left behind was rotten human flesh and a few scraps of grass. Not even enough to feed a starving infant. The same scene repeated itself throughout the city, except for one place. Standing before a massive structure at the city's center, Aegon finally found what he was looking for. I knew it. Even filthy places like this have their command post. The building before him was noticeably more intact and refined than the others. Aegon naturally assumed this was the place everything had been coordinated from. If there's anything worth looking at in this trash heap, it's definitely in there. I see you found a lovely place, Aegon. The prince turned to find Phoenix and Ghost had caught up. Still smiling, he gestured grandly toward the building. Be my guests after you. Phoenix ignored the flirtatious prince and made his way toward the building's massive iron doors, which he shattered with a single punch. The three entered simultaneously and began their search. To their surprise, the interior was relatively organized. There was furniture that was at least usable, desks filled with old documents and files, and rooms that contained relatively clean beds. But aside from that, no matter how many floors they searched, they found nothing of true importance. As for the documents themselves, they were written in a strange language that none of them could read. What the hell is this language? Phoenix muttered, glancing toward Aegon, who was staring blankly at one of the papers. For a moment, it seemed like the prince had understood something. That's what Phoenix hoped, judging by how focused he looked. But Aegon suddenly smiled and tossed the document aside. Don't look at me like that. I didn't understand a thing. Just like you. I see. Phoenix was about to give up until Ghost called from below. You two come downstairs. There's something you'll want to see. Responding to Ghost's call, Phoenix descended at once, followed by Aegon, who gave one last glance at the paper he had discarded. His eyes were fixed on the bold title that adorned it. Third-generation contracts. Then he turned his back and followed Phoenix down. Chapter 327. Ashes of Innocence. Once they reached the ground floor, they found Ghost standing beside a massive hole he had punched into the floor. and inside was a wide staircase leading underground. I discovered it by chance while checking the building structure. This place might be much bigger than we thought. Well done. For the first time since entering the land of the dead, they had found something that might actually help them. If they went through the trouble of hiding this, then whatever lies below is something they didn't want others to see. Phoenix assumed that whatever was down there would be worth the effort. Let's go. He conjured a bright flame in his hand, lighting up the dark stairway. The three of them descended in silence, tension building with each step. With every move downward, their expressions began to change. Something had started to fill the air. The scent of blood, accompanied by something else they couldn't quite place. But it was strong, overwhelming. Eventually, they reached another iron door bigger than the last. The smell was seeping through its cracks. All this cursed aura, just from the gaps in the door? Even Ghost, used to death and blood, furrowed his brows. Only God knew how many corpses lay beyond that door. It was almost comical, how the lands of the Ultras toyed with them like a twisted roller coaster ride. Let's see what they're hiding in here, Phoenix muttered as his fist ignited even fiercer than before. He punched the door, blowing it apart and finally unveiling the horror that had been buried inside. As the barrier fell, the wave of blood-soaked aura hit their faces like a tsunami of death. Phoenix and Ghost both went pale the moment they saw what lay beyond. Well, would you look at that? The Ultras really are insane. Ha ha ha. Aegon was the only one who laughed, clutching his head with one hand. His twisted reaction raised countless questions, but Phoenix and Ghost were too shocked to say a word. Their eyes were glued to the abomination before them. Beyond the door was a massive corridor, one that stretched deep below the upper building. Its walls, dimly lit by soft white lights embedded along the sides, revealed the nightmare. On every wall hung countless women. Their wrists were chained with rusted iron restraints. The monsters had stripped them naked, robbing them of every ounce of dignity. Their bodies had been sliced open from abdomen to pelvis, entrails spilling out in a grotesque display. Every single one of them had been gutted, completely emptied. And on the cold floor, between the walls, was a pile, no, a mountain of disfigured infant corpses. Stacked heads, one over another. A small hill of mutilated children. Ghost stepped forward slowly and knelt beside one of the corpses. Tough red skin, hollow, lifeless eyes. The child's body was warped beyond recognition. He looked back and forth between the infants and the gutted women. It didn't take much to connect the dots. My God, what the hell happened in this cursed place? Phoenix's voice trembled with fury. Meanwhile, Aegon continued down the corridor with his usual detached expression, unfazed by the corpses beneath his feet. We'll find the answer soon enough. Phoenix cursed everything. These corpses, the Ultras, Aegon's coldness. All of it. With a single motion, he unleashed his flames. They consumed the bodies at a terrifying speed, reducing them to ash. At the very least, you won't rot in this cold, empty place anymore. Phoenix's fire was something to behold. It burned only what he willed it to, and vanished the moment its task was complete. How noble of you, Aegon commented, his usual smile never wavering, as if he were strolling through a field of flowers, not the remains of mothers and their slaughtered children. Slowly but steadily, the trio continued their descent as Phoenix burned every corpse along the way. The place was massive. The sheer number of bodies was overwhelming, enough to make anyone wonder what kind of twisted mind could be behind something like this. And finally, after a long march, Phoenix and his companions reached the answer. And what an answer it was. Impossible! The young lord of House Sunlight muttered, staring at the corpse before him. Ghost, visibly tense, whispered in disbelief. Is that? But Aegon simply nodded, a faint smile on his lips, as if everything finally made sense. A demon. Yes. The corpse lying on the steel table had a larger-than-human frame, rough gray skin, and prominent horns. Its grotesque appearance left no room for doubt. It was a demon. That can't be. Weren't all demons wiped out after the first hero sealed the gates? Ghost asked, and Phoenix nodded. That's true. Supposedly, not a single demon remained after Kazes Valerian sacrificed himself. But what stood before them was undeniably a demon, and they all knew it. Still, Phoenix didn't panic. We can't say for certain that every last demon was destroyed. Don't forget Astaroth appeared out of nowhere too. This wasn't the first time they'd encountered a demon, so it was too early to jump to conclusions. But Aegon interjected immediately. You're being far too optimistic, Professor Phoenix. With a flick of his sword, Aegon released a surge of lightning that lit up the entire chamber, revealing what lay behind the first corpse. In that instant, the truth struck them all. A second body, a third, a fourth, and dozens more. Demon corpses tossed aside like the women and children before them. And from what they saw, these demons had died only recently. What now, Professor? Do you think these are all just stray survivors? With every word Aegon spoke, the weight of the moment sank deeper into their bones. These aren't survivors. This is an entirely new batch that arrived here recently. Do you know what that means?
No.
Phoenix tried to deny it, but Aegon shook his head. Face it, what you're looking at is undeniable proof. It was time to abandon their illusions. The seal is broken. The gates have reopened. The demons can cross into our world again. That single statement shattered whatever composure Ghost and Phoenix had left. Because if there was no seal keeping the gates closed, then it meant that demons far stronger than Astaroth, those beyond the 19th rank, could come through. Monsters capable of leveling mountains with a flick of their fingers. But Aegon didn't stop there. He kept twisting the dagger. And you've noticed it, haven't you? The pattern. A demon. A woman. A disfigured child. I assume you've figured it out by now. Silence. Aegon laughed. They're experimenting. Hybridization. Have a look, demon and human. What should I call them? Half demons? Heh, delightful. His laughter was manic. But Phoenix and Ghost could only stare, unable to understand. Why was he laughing? Why laugh when what he just said could mark the beginning of humanity's extinction? But there was no way of knowing what truly went through the prince's mind. Hybridization. Phoenix repeated the word silently. Suddenly, everything made sense. The sudden rise of powerful lords. The strange blood samples the researchers couldn't explain. Demons and humans. Children born from both. Phoenix staggered back, clutching his head, trying to comprehend the scale of what was happening. May the gods help us. The situation was far worse than they imagined. The tea party. Sitting gracefully in her chair, having finished the last drop of her tea, Beatrice smiled as she stared down at the board before her. Looks like they've finally uncovered the truth. The middle-aged man beside her nodded. I don't know why you chose to reveal it now. Well, it won't change anything. Aside from crushing their morale before the war. It's a game, Mr. Simon. The witch's game. Oh? Then I wonder what you're planning next. In response, Beatrice laughed softly and rose to her feet. It's time I made a move. You're sending in your favorite puppet, then? I look forward to this performance. Key. With elegance in every step, Beatrice walked away, casting a sidelong glance at Simon. Enjoy the next act, Mr. Simon. Chapter 328. Dancing to the Devil's Tune 1. Fry Starlight's POV. I wonder, when did it all begin? The turning point that changed everything, and toyed with the fate of mankind itself. I suppose it started when Phoenix returned with the prince and Ghost, after spending a full 7 hours exploring the isolated city we'd found earlier. Upon their return, Phoenix reported that the place was a ghost town, completely devoid of human life. The entire city had been abandoned just before we arrived. The bad news was that despite its size, the city held nothing of real value that could help our group survive in the hellish lands of the Ultras. Still, it wasn't all meaningless. We decided to stay in the city for the time being. One of the buildings contained a few beds and some clean clothes, at least. Setting up camp there wasn't the worst idea, given that it was a fully enclosed area. If something happened, we could respond properly. That was Phoenix's current decision, and that was where his report ended. Yet, for some reason, the somber look on his face raised many questions. As if he had seen something no one should ever witness, something tragic enough to etch that expression into his features. Phoenix had clearly chosen to hide the truth, along with Ghost and the Prince, hoping to avoid further crushing the group's already fragile morale. Unfortunately for them, I had already seen everything. Using my third-person POV skill and leveraging the 50 affection points I had with Ghost, I'd been following them from the very start, completely undetected. And that's how I saw what they saw. Third-generation contracts, demons, and the truth that the seal had already been broken. Fully aware of those horrifying facts, I concealed everything behind my usual cold expression. But deep down, I was shaken too. The real problem wasn't the demonic breeding or the reopening of the gates. I'd known about those things for a long time. They were, after all, part of the story I once wrote. The problem was the timing. They came early. Far, far too early. Frighteningly early. These events weren't supposed to unfold until long after the coming war with the Ultras, years from now at least. Yet somehow we jumped ahead in the timeline so drastically that the gates had already opened. At this rate, this wasn't a war anymore. It was a gamble. A gamble where all we could do was raise our hands in prayer and hope nothing truly monstrous walked through those gates now opened anew. Because any demon from the upper 15 seats alone would be enough to wipe out the entire Imperial army. We could only pray that Earth, the little planet at the end of the world, wasn't appealing to them. Anyway, I got so lost in thought that I didn't snap out of it until we reached the empty city wall. Phoenix came to a deliberate stop at the top. Everyone, head to the city center and get some rest. What about you? The Sunlight twins, who had been sticking to Phoenix like shadows, spoke up, clearly wanting to stay close to him. I'll remain on the wall, in case something happens. Then we'll stay with you. Phoenix raised an eyebrow as he looked at Ivan and Scarite, who insisted on staying. They would only slow him down if something happened, but for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to refuse his cousins. I wouldn't recommend it, but I won't stop you either. Judging by how he treated them, it was easy to tell something deeper existed between the members of the Sunlight family. But that wasn't the concern at the moment. Are you sure about this, Professor Phoenix? You're clearly the strongest among us. If something happens and you're not in top shape, it could be disastrous. Taking the watch alone without even a moment of sleep might have been a terrible decision. But Phoenix shook his head with resolve. I'll be fine. Don't underestimate the stamina of an SS-ranked awakened. I could go a week like this before my energy starts to run dry. His response left me with nothing else to say. Phoenix really did intend to carry the entire burden on his own. Some of the students visibly relaxed just from hearing that. They were completely relying on him. But that wasn't good. This land was vast, and the enemy surrounded us from every side. What if Phoenix were somehow separated from us? That would be the end for many of them. I wanted to say something, but chose to hold my tongue. My position within the group was still uncertain. So, for now, I decided to keep moving forward. After leaving Phoenix and his cousins behind, the rest of us made our way to the city center, the same administrative building where they'd found the corpses. The irony was absurd. We were about to sleep in the very place where all those bodies had once been. But Phoenix had incinerated everything down there, so there wasn't a single trace of what had been done. There's clean water, blankets, and beds here. Pick what suits you and take care of yourselves, Ghost said plainly as he guided us to the right place. Once everyone confirmed his words, they immediately erupted with excitement and noise, their faces bright with relief. Water for bathing, clean places to sleep. Just the fact that we wouldn't have to camp out in the open brought immense joy to everyone, especially the girls. What are they making all that fuss about? We've barely made it through our first day here. I nodded in agreement with Danzo. It didn't seem reasonable to be celebrating this much after just a single day. Are these kids really the elite humanities counting on? Danzo kept grumbling, and I couldn't help but laugh. You do realize you and I are the same age, right? Take a look at this. He pointed to his bulging biceps, two slabs of muscle stacked onto his arms, along with his broad chest, solid abs, and towering frame. Does this wrecking machine look anything like those clowns? I didn't know how to respond. Danzo did have a point. His gray hair, pale skin, and the countless scars on his body made him look far older than he actually was. You're right. You even look older than Phoenix himself, my dear friend. Not that he was the only one. Demon, who had stripped down in front of everyone for a shower, wasn't exactly lacking either. And neither was the solitary Ragna. I've still got more to give. Danzo clenched his fist, his face hardening. Something on your mind? He looked a little surprised by my question before exhaling deeply. Am I really that easy to read? Not at all. I've just spent enough time with you to know when something's off. After 2 whole years, it wasn't hard to understand Danzo, no affection system needed. Danzo sat against the wall beside me, eyes locked on the ceiling. It's not even worth talking about, really. He opened his palm, allowing his aura to take shape, forming the image of a circular silver dragon. I barely made it through the last battle. Even though our enemies were weak, the shield drained me completely. Meanwhile, Demon Valerian didn't even break a sweat. Danzo grit his teeth, his frustration spilling out. I want to get stronger. You already are. Heh. I don't need to hear that from you, genius. Genius. I echoed the word to myself quietly, realizing just how much others' perceptions of me had changed. Do I really look like one? I asked without thinking. Danzo replied without hesitation. Yeah, you're a genius. All someone like me can do is try to keep up. There was depth to his words, this wasn't just talk. Danzo was the hardest working person I knew. He trained day and night, constantly striving to refine himself. And yet, no matter how hard he worked, he was often overtaken by others, those born under the label of genius. Geniuses blessed with overwhelming power that allowed them to surpass someone like Danzo with far less effort. Somehow, I had become one of them. But I hated being called that. After all, the power that dazzled everyone wasn't even mine to begin with, it was borrowed. Unconsciously, I reached into my clothes and touched the dark, nameless mask I always kept hidden. I was the one relying on a strength that didn't even belong to me, while Danzo had built his power from the ground up. I didn't have the right to call myself a genius in front of someone like him. But I won't give up. Ignoring me as I sank into my thoughts again, Danzo suddenly stood, eyes burning with renewed determination. If what I'm doing isn't enough, then I'll just double the effort. For a moment, I stood stunned by him, and by how he always managed to keep moving forward. With a talent that might never take him to SS rank, he still wanted to fight. Still wanted to challenge geniuses like Demon Valerian, who was born with everything. In that moment, I found myself truly admiring him. You really are something else. No need to tell me. I already know. With a smile, I followed him toward the showers. I was genuinely glad to have someone like him by my side. His presence had saved me in more ways than one. Chapter 329. Dancing to the Devil's Tune, 2. Night fell. Phoenix remained on the wall, keeping watch. The rest of the students had spread out across the strange administrative building, claiming rooms for themselves. The place was quiet, eerily so, and completely dark. While everyone else slept, the silence was broken by the sound of slow footsteps echoing through the dim corridor. Step by step, a young man walked forward, dressed in a black robe, one hand on the wall, coughing now and then. With his disheveled blonde hair and pale face, the figure was unmistakable. Xavier Adams, the young mage, walked on with a single goal in mind. Damn you! Clutching the wall with one hand and his constricted chest with the other, the young mage looked like he was in genuine agony. I curse you! He continued muttering between gasps, until a sudden coughing fit overtook him. So violent it forced everything in his stomach out onto the floor, along with blood so pale it had lost all color. Damn you! With a pale face, Xavier struggled to keep walking. What's wrong? Xavier! The young mage immediately froze when he heard that familiar voice, the very one that made his blood boil. The voice came from a figure standing at the end of the dark corridor, golden eyes glowing fiercely. "Were you looking for me?" "Aegon, ugh." Xavier cried out the name before collapsing again, vomiting blood, unable to even form proper words. "What's this, Xavier? I always thought you were filthy, but throwing up your guts in front of me like this? That's just revolting, heh." The prince laughed, almost as if he had expected Xavier to show up. The mage continued vomiting profusely, his blurry eyes barely able to focus on Aegon anymore. The sound of his violent coughing echoed through the halls, drawing the elite students out of their rooms in a rush. Lights turned on, revealing the sorry state of the young mage. His eyes still locked onto Aegon, struggling to speak. "Xavier!" Selena was the first to reach him, followed by Emilia and the rest of the group. "What's happening to him? Why is he like this?" Selena screamed, horrified by the black veins writhing beneath Xavier's skin and the blood pouring from his mouth. Emilia sprang into action, tearing open his clothes to reveal his chest, and what she found shocked everyone. The skin across his chest had turned completely black, and the festering wound reeked of rotting pus. "What is this? I know I healed him." It was the bite wound he had received earlier from a mutated human. The holy energy should have purified it completely, yet in less than a day, it had worsened to this degree. Emilia immediately channeled her sacred power to try healing him again, but her expression darkened as she realized nothing was working. What's going on? No matter how much sacred power she poured into him, it had no effect. That's when Aegon spoke. "It's useless. The demon blood from that bite already reached his heart. It's only a matter of time before he becomes like the other mutants." "Demon blood? No. There has to be a way to save him." Selena shouted at Aegon, her voice breaking. He just shrugged casually. "Then I'd love to hear it from you." She had no answer, but Emilia, resolute, continued pouring her power into Xavier, refusing to give up. Snow joined her, summoning Vermithor. "My sword carries immense sacred power. It might help." Emilia nodded, continuing her efforts as their combined light bathed the room in radiant energy. Their strength was so overwhelming that everyone present felt a wave of relief wash over them, their minor wounds healing instantly. Everyone except Xavier. Sacred power could suppress demonic energy, but not the blood itself. The mage's eyes never left Aegon. Bathed in Emilia's light, Xavier's thoughts drifted through his tragic past. He had once lived a happy childhood, loved by his parents. Then he discovered his incredible magical talent, which earned him a place in the temple. There, he met friends who became like family. Life had been good until Kai Luke's betrayal and their capture by the demon prince, Aegon Valerian. Threatening their parents, Aegon had given them all a task: to find the one who had disrupted his plans. Selena succeeded and saved her parents. But what about Xavier? Aegon wasn't merciful. He didn't kill both of Xavier's parents. He was far too calculating for that. Instead, the prince played one of his twisted games. He decided to kill just one of them. Xavier still remembered that day. Bound and gagged in a wooden chair, he watched in terror as Aegon approached with his signature smile. Behind him, guards dragged in Xavier's beloved parents. "Xavier, oh Xavier, you really let me down this time." He had failed, and failure came with a price. The young mage trembled in fear, dreading what Aegon might do to his parents. But the prince had no intention of making it simple. "Let's play a game, Xavier." That's what he called it, a game. "I'll kill one of your parents, and let the other live." He spoke with a cheerful tone, completely ignoring Xavier's muffled screams as he tried to leap at him, only to fall off the chair. "How rude, Xavier. Let me finish." With a swift kick, Aegon shoved him back into place. "As I was saying, I'll kill one of your parents, but I can't decide which one." Aegon gripped Xavier's mother and father by their collars, both trembling in his hands. "So I thought, why not let you choose, Xavier?" With a swift flick of his wrist, he removed the gag from the terrified mage's mouth. What? That was the only word Xavier could utter in his stunned state. But Aegon burst into laughter before shouting. Choose, Xavier. Who lives? Who dies? He spun a thin dagger in his fingers, pressing it alternately against the throat of Xavier's mother, then his father. Choose! Aegon screamed maniacally as Xavier broke down in tears. Don't kill them. Please, take me instead. The young mage begged, but the prince only shook his head in disappointment. That's not how games are played, Xavier. You have to choose. Aegon grabbed Xavier by the neck, his eyes wide with lunacy. Choose. 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 Please. Stop. Why are you doing this to me? Kill me instead. Please. Choose. 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 Amid Aegon's screams and laughter, and Xavier's sobs and desperation, a horrific scene was painted, one soaked in despair and innocent blood. After several minutes of unhinged cruelty, Aegon finally grew bored. So you won't choose, huh? Kill me? Xavier whispered, the last word he could manage. Understood. Aegon stepped back swiftly, moving behind Xavier's father. Grabbing him by the head, he yanked it back. With a sickening smile, the prince slid his blade across the man's throat, unleashing a crimson fountain that drenched Xavier's face in blood. His mother screamed in horror, and Xavier froze, unable to comprehend what had just happened. At Aegon's gesture, guards entered, dragging the father's corpse away and escorting the mother out, leaving only Xavier and the prince alone. Remember this well, Xavier. I have no patience for failure. He patted the stunned mage's head, whispering coldly, fail me again, and who knows what might happen to your dear mother. Understand. His father was dead. His mother remained in Aegon's grip. Before the prince, Xavier felt what true despair meant. And now, in the final moments of his life, lying powerless on the floor while the prince laughed, having taken one parent and kept the other as a hostage, Xavier's only emotion was regret. I didn't live a life worth remembering. I achieved nothing to be proud of. He could no longer speak. Blood and bile filled his throat. Through my own weakness, my father died, and my mother was left in the jaws of a monster worse than any demon. He had failed utterly and completely. You killed my father, so I curse you. You made my mother cry, left her a widow, so I curse you. You ruined my life, tortured me, killed me, so I curse you. Ignoring everyone around him, Xavier raised a trembling hand toward Aegon, eyes lifeless, and channeled all his remaining magic. His pain, his hatred, his sorrow, all of it was poured into a single spell. A curse he had forged silently all this time, just for this moment. I curse you. The final power left in his soul burst forth. A deadly curse aimed straight at the heart of the demon prince. The magic had no color. No one noticed it, but Aegon felt it pierce his heart. For a moment, his expression froze in shock. This was a death curse. A curse that could only be broken by another mage. And here, isolated from the outside world, there was no one who could help Aegon. At the very least, I'll take you with me. That was Xavier's final thought. If the prince died, then his mother and Selena would finally be free. As he exhaled his last breath, Xavier looked at the prince one final time. He wanted to see fear, panic. He wanted Aegon to suffer, just for a moment. To watch that arrogant prince, who thought the world bowed to him, finally break. But fate was never kind to Xavier. Not even in death. Because what he saw wasn't fear. It was the same wicked smile, the very one Aegon had worn when he killed his father. In that moment, Xavier watched his powerful curse shatter, fragmenting uselessly before it could reach Aegon's heart. Stunned, the mage stared as Aegon moved his lips without making a sound. But Xavier understood the words because he was watching closely. I'll take good care of her, your mother. Xavier's eyes flew open wide, before slowly returning to emptiness. The light of sacred energy faded. There was no need for it anymore. Everyone stepped back, silent, as Xavier's cold corpse remained still on the floor. Eyes blank, still locked on the void. His face frozen in pain, as if even death brought him no peace. And so, surrounded by the elite students, Xavier Adams died from his wound, marking the fall of the first soul. Remaining students, 20. Fry Starlight's POV. Silence lingered for a while. The loud noise was what had drawn us together earlier, the sound of Xavier breathing his last. And now, here we were, standing around his corpse, unable to say a word. As I looked at the rotting body, corrupted by demonic blood, I could vaguely imagine the torment Xavier must have endured. He must have known he was going to die, helpless to stop it. Maybe, in those final moments, he tried to do something, anything that could give his life some meaning. But the look on his face, that expression of sorrow, fear, and bitter regret, said otherwise. Despite knowing all that, I didn't feel anything. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I simply thought his death was pitiful. And I'm sure many of the others shared that same thought. Everyone except Selena, who mourned him. The rest just stood in silence. We should inform Professor Phoenix. Ceres was the first to break the silence, pointing out the obvious. After that, things happened quickly. Ceres crafted a coffin of ice to preserve Xavier's body from further decay. Then we all split up. The only emotion we seemed to share on our faces was fear. Fear of death, which had finally come knocking. I see. That was all Phoenix said after learning one of his students had died. From a single look, I could tell how angry he was. Perhaps he blamed himself, since he was the one who told us to loot the corpses. Had he not done that, maybe Xavier wouldn't have been bitten in the first place. But while Phoenix seemed to carry the blame on his shoulders, none of the students did. After a brief discussion that lasted only a few minutes, we buried Xavier's body here, within this foreign Ultrian city. There was no way to take him home, and no one volunteered to carry his body. We got rid of him quickly. So quickly, in fact, that some didn't even show up for the burial. Still, despite how pathetic his death seemed, it wasn't meaningless. With the first casualty, we were all forced to face the truth. Forced to return to reality, realizing just how close death truly was. A single bite, a small wound that might have seemed trivial to most, was enough to kill. So what about the rest of this dark continent? That night, I found myself wandering alone, lost in thought, avoiding everyone else. As I passed by the dilapidated buildings that once housed the Ultras, I wondered how they managed to live like this, feeding on their own kind, leaving corpses strewn about like worthless trash, like dogs. Then I asked myself another question. How did they lure us here? Teleportation isn't something that can be tampered with, unless the gate itself is compromised. And that points to the existence of a traitor within the temple. A mage, to be precise, since only mages can operate those gates. A skilled mage. One very good at hiding. And yet, I couldn't think of a single name. Even though I'm the one who created this world, I couldn't figure it out. What if the traitor was still nearby? I'm completely in the dark, and it didn't seem like that would change anytime soon. After wandering aimlessly for hours, I finally stopped. I leapt up and climbed onto a building taller than the rest, one that overlooked most of the city and its high walls. Ultra's city looked like an ancient desert town from a forgotten age. But the difference was, this place was utterly dead. Demons devour life force, the aura that sustains the earth itself. This city, and everything around it, had long been drained. The land died because of the demons Phoenix and the others discovered underground. At this rate, if the demons keep coming, it's only a matter of time before Earth suffers the same fate as Launder, a lifeless world devoid of even a trace of vitality. In that moment, I raised my head toward the sky, still asking questions that had no answers. The gate Kazes Valerian sealed. Who broke it? Who opened the door that let all those demons flood in from beneath the city? To shatter a seal of that magnitude, it would take at least one of the 10 high-ranking demons. and only one name came to mind. Weskier, the rank 4 demon who fought my father 17 years ago. Weskier is terrifyingly powerful. He managed to pass through the seal by force, though he severely damaged him. Still, he didn't break it, he merely forced his way through. Later, he lost that fight to my father and the engineer who stood by his side. But did Weskier ever really leave Earth? If he didn't, then he's likely the one who destroyed the seal. A monster of his level could definitely do it. But if it was him, then where did he go? Where is he hiding? The demon who bears the eye of the king, the eye that can see the fate of all living beings. The same being who once laid his hand on me. If a monster like that were to return and attack the Empire, there would be nothing I could do to stop it. Fry Starlight wouldn't be able to defeat him. I muttered quietly, then pulled something from inside my clothes. A black, metallic object in the shape of a mask. Fry can't do it, but you can. Staring into the hollow eyes of the nameless mask, I recalled what happened in Launder. To be honest, I'd been thinking about those events every day since then, but I'd buried the thoughts after we fell into the Ultra's trap. Still, Xavier's death today brought those memories flooding back. I knew I was going to die one day. Everyone does. But the difference between me and the others is that my death would open the door for something greater to live. Because I'm just a temporary host, a vessel crafted for a certain king. A king powerful enough to achieve everything I ever wanted. I wasn't sad about that. On the contrary, I'd fully accepted it. Accepted the fact that one day, I'd be replaced, that my will would be cast aside. But Xavier's death made me realize something important. I don't want to die like that. Pathetic death. One without meaning. A death so insignificant that people throw your body away on the same day and forget you the next. If death and disappearance are truly my fate, then at the very least I want to die on my own terms, whether here against the Ultras or elsewhere. I am the master of my own fate. It may not be my place to say that, considering I'm just a puppet being pulled by the strings of the blue-eyed engineer, but this time I really wanted to defy his expectations, to break the future they'd prepared for me up there, the fate I was never allowed to escape. I wanted to shatter it, to succeed, and then die the right way. There's no such thing as an omnipotent being in this world. Not even Agaroth, the great demon king himself. So maybe, what seems impossible at first glance, isn't entirely impossible after all. I guess that's enough for now. Without realizing it, I'd spent hours like that, gazing at the sky, thinking through every little detail, drowning in isolation, a lone star drifting through the void. By the time I moved again, dawn had already arrived. The cold air that stung my chest and the faint sunlight breaking through the ruins marked the end of our first day in the abandoned Ultras city, and our first night without our fallen comrade, Xavier Adams. I intended to return to where the rest of the elite class had set up camp, the administrative building with the corpses buried beneath it. But I stopped when I heard someone yelling near the wall beside me. Maybe it was curiosity that made me approach the source of the voice. And thanks to my enhanced senses, it wasn't hard to pinpoint. As expected, the shouting came from none other than Scarite Sunlight, who was lashing out at a grim-faced phoenix standing in front of her. Why are you trying to push us away like this? Is that what you want? For us to die out there like Xavier? She screamed at him while her brother Ivan tried to hold her back. Phoenix didn't react. He just stared at her in silence, his fiery eyes glowing faintly. That was never my intention, he finally said. But starting tomorrow, I'll be moving on my own to search for the escape gate. I can't take you with me on a mission that dangerous. It was the first time I'd heard of Phoenix's plan. Apparently, he intended to explore alone, leaving us behind in this relatively safer location. It meant he wanted to shoulder the greater danger himself. But Scarite didn't see it that way, and her response made that clear. So you want to abandon us and run away alone? How fitting of you, Miracle Lord. Scar, I'm not abandoning anyone. Phoenix reached out to her, trying to calm her down, but she slapped his hand away instantly. Don't touch me. Her explosive reaction made me wonder how Phoenix, who could erase her with a single blow, was keeping so calm. "Get out of my sight. You're the one who took everything from us. Our future, our family, our father. I hope you die on this cursed land with the rest of us." She turned and stormed off, leaving behind a stunned silence. Ivan bowed awkwardly to Phoenix, then chased after his sister. Phoenix let out a long sigh as he watched his family disappear. Once they were gone, he turned toward a dark corner with a forced smile. "How long do you plan on hiding there?" "Just as I expected of you. I stepped out of my hiding spot once I realized he'd noticed me. There's no fooling an SS-ranked awakened senses." Chapter 331. The Day Death Knocked. 2. Sorry for eavesdropping. I'm more sorry you had to witness such a pathetic sight. With a single jump, Phoenix scaled the wall and I followed him shortly after. I never thought I'd see the proud Sunlight family fighting among themselves. There's no such thing as perfection in this life, Fry Starlight. Our family is far from perfect. In fact, if you ask me, I'd say we're broken. Currently, the Sunlight family was the strongest among all the noble houses, as they alone possessed 3 fighters ranked SS or higher. So hearing Phoenix call them broken didn't seem realistic, but I knew better. I knew there was more going on behind the scenes. "This is about the next family, Lord, isn't it?" Phoenix nodded. "That's right." Standing side by side, we gazed down from above at the desolate land stretching far beyond us. That's when Phoenix shared some truths about his family. The Sunlight family is a bit unique when it comes to inheriting the title of Lord. He raised his hand, summoning a crimson flame, then began manipulating it effortlessly. It started when I turned out to be the only one capable of enduring the family's current Lord combat style, the Eternal Flame. In fact, I mastered it completely, something even Iris himself, the current Lord, was never able to do. I nodded, understanding what he meant. That was a fact I already knew. The Eternal Flame style was dangerous, and only Iris Sunlight had ever used it before. But even he had never fully mastered it. It had left him with several lasting side effects, like a perpetually burning beard and the inability to feel heat or cold. Phoenix, on the other hand, had perfected it, achieved a 100% mastery, an unprecedented accomplishment. The title of Lord is given only to the strongest in our bloodline. That was my uncle Iris Sunlight. But unlike him, who wielded great power, his children lacked both strength and talent. Iris had only 2 children, twins, Ivan and Scarite. Both were considered gifted by normal standards, but their competition wasn't ordinary. In the end, Iris chose me as his successor, completely overlooking his own children. Compared to the blazing star that was Phoenix, the flames of Ivan and Scarite were faint, barely there. I suppose that made them hate me at least a little. Phoenix smiled bitterly. That was when I realized he never despised them. In fact, he had been trying to protect them with everything he had. "If you ask me, you're far more fit to lead than either of them. You're not obligated to protect them, Phoenix. You don't owe anyone that." Trying to save everyone had never been realistic. He could try, sure, but he'd ultimately fail no matter how strong he was. Xavier's death was the perfect example. I get what you're trying to say, Fry, but I can't help feeling responsible for them. If I can't even save this many people, how can I lead an entire family one day? So this is how Phoenix thinks. It felt like I was beginning to understand him a little more. Still, I didn't fully agree. "No one in this world can do that, Phoenix." "I know, but I'll try, in my own way. And one more thing." He turned to me with a faint smile. "Your father could have done it. Easily." For the first time during this conversation, my expression changed the moment he mentioned my father. Abraham Starlight once invaded the Ultras territory all on his own, fought everyone there, and returned alive. I was just a kid back then, but I remember feeling this fire in my chest when I heard about it, thinking, how did he do that? Phoenix spoke with excitement. He became a different person the moment my father entered the topic. "But you shouldn't compare yourself to my father, Phoenix," I replied bluntly. My father had reached SSS rank, armed with knowledge and power from 2 lifetimes. He was exceptional. That's what made his light shine so brightly. Hard to argue with that, especially coming from his son. Phoenix's smile didn't falter, proof that he wasn't easily shaken. We talked for a long while afterward. About my father, about the current situation. And once there was nothing left to say, we each went our separate ways. I returned to the central building, where the rest of the elite class were staying. That day, I felt like I finally understood Phoenix a little more. A day had passed since Xavier's death. His demise threw everyone into a state of heightened caution, each afraid they'd be the next in line. Among them, Sansa spent most of her time alone. The other girls came to see her occasionally, and she never refused them, but she found herself preferring solitude, away from everyone else. When did I become like this? The princess wondered, confused by her own state of mind. Solitude used to be a prison that reminded her of her title, an heir without real connections. But somehow, being alone lately gave her a sense of peace, as if it had never been the source of her sadness. Sitting in the temporary room she'd claimed for herself inside the abandoned city's central building, Sansa spent most of her time reflecting. Most of all, she dwelled on a painful truth. She was no longer like other humans. Her gaze drifted to her elbow, the spot where she'd been bitten by that mutated human. Only a day had passed, and yet her arm was already spotless. Not a single scar remained. She hadn't felt anything. But unlike her, Xavier, her classmate, had died the moment he was bitten. He died a pitiful death, and she lived as if nothing had happened. That only reinforced a single truth. She was different, not human, but something else entirely. Those thoughts consumed her for a while, at least until a sudden knock on the door interrupted them. The knock was soft, gentle enough that she immediately assumed it was a girl. Yes, Sansa answered briefly, prompting the voice behind the door to speak. It's me. Adriana. I brought some food. Adriana's clumsy voice came from behind the door, which Sansa then opened. You didn't have to trouble yourself. I told you I didn't need anything. Sansa's tone was firm, at first, but it quickly softened the moment she saw Adriana shrink back timidly. The shy girl's demeanor made Sansa sigh in surrender. Come in. Okay. Adriana stepped into the small, barren room, barely furnished with just a single bed and a chair. Both girls sat on the bed, and silence followed for a while. Sansa quietly ate the simple meal of bread and mashed potatoes placed before her. Meanwhile, Adriana looked as though she was trying to muster the courage to speak. Is there something you want to tell me? Sansa decided to help her out. Adriana blushed, then nodded. Without delay, she bowed her head deeply.
I'm sorry.
The sudden apology made Sansa frown slightly. For what? Everything. You've always been kind to me. Even though you're a princess and I'm just a commoner. Despite how well you treated me, I still doubted you. I saw you as something inhuman. Adriana paused for a moment. Sansa continued staring at her in silence. As your friend, I shouldn't have acted like that. I know I can't force you to forgive me, but at the very least I wanted to apologize. I'm really, truly sorry. For all of it. The way Adriana's body trembled made it clear she had summoned a lot of courage just to say that. It was the most she'd spoken in one go since the beginning. Sansa spent a few moments just gazing at her, making Adriana visibly flinch. But then, the princess finally broke the awkward silence. You know, Adriana, you're special. What? Your face. Sansa gently cupped Adriana's cheeks, her large, black eyes locking onto her. You probably don't know this, but I can read faces. There are only a handful of people who can truly hide from my ability. To resist Sansa's perception required exceptional calm, emotional control, and a perfectly unreadable poker face. Very few possessed all of that. Even Fry had only developed that resistance after countless brushes with death. But you're different, Adriana. Even though you're just a naive, shy girl, I can't read your face at all. Sansa pulled her hands away, finishing her observation. Still, your actions always reveal everything. You're so simple. And I think that's what I liked about you from the beginning. Adriana was like an open book. Easy to read, easy to understand. Unlike the rest of the elite students with powerful families and long-standing names, Adriana came from nothing. No status. No lineage. Her talent was the only thing that had brought her this far. She was naive, deeply so. But maybe that's exactly what made Sansa prefer her over the others. There's no need to apologize, Adriana. You didn't do anything wrong. If anything, you saved my life. I should be the one thanking you. The princess smiled, but Adriana waved her hands rapidly in denial. And no, I didn't do anything worth mentioning. She flustered in a panic, accidentally knocking her glasses off. Sansa caught them midair and gently placed them back on her face, and both girls laughed together. Perhaps not everything could be fixed, but for now their relationship had. The two spent the rest of the night talking to each other. And just like that, the second night came to an end. Chapter 332. The Witch's Gambit 1. The days passed quickly. The elite students would gather from time to time with Phoenix, who had taken it upon himself to explore outside the city. They spent their time devising plans, trying to figure out a way to escape as soon as possible. Among them, Selena found herself constantly glancing at Aegon, a single thought plaguing her mind. How did he do it? That question tormented her. On the night of Xevier's death, she had clearly seen the curse cast on Aegon by the dying sorcerer. It was a powerful curse. Even she, a skilled witch, would have struggled to lift it. And yet Aegon, who knew nothing of magic, shattered it effortlessly. Selena found herself spiraling into thought over the rogue prince. She couldn't figure out how to deal with someone like him, especially when her parents' lives were in his hands. What an irony! Aegon Valyrian made her feel more helpless than the entire Ultras continent that had them cornered. The days continued to slip by. The first, the second, the third. The students, fearful of death, sank into a tense silence. A silence that felt all too unnatural. Phoenix had left the city several times searching for a route out, but couldn't venture far without endangering the others. So he returned empty-handed every time. At this rate, the elite class had no choice but to start moving soon. And then came the fourth night. As the dark sky stretched over them, the group gathered one last time to finalize their plan to leave the city. Some were reluctant. They had finally found a place to rest in peace. But they all knew they had to move if they wanted to survive. Still, a single question lingered in their minds. What's with this damn silence? Why haven't we been attacked yet? Danzo voiced the thoughts on everyone's minds. They had spent the past few days on edge, expecting death at any moment, yet none of those fears had come to pass. Maybe we're not a priority? Cerys Moonlight offered the thought, and as soon as she did, the prince burst out laughing. Glad to see someone using their brain for once. Everyone turned to Aegon, who looked just as fed up with the situation as they were. As Cerys said, we're not a priority. We're bait. Bait? Yeah, just a side distraction. Something they can deal with whenever they feel like it. From the start, their survival had been pure luck, thanks only to Fry, who happened to be nearby. Otherwise, they'd all be dead. The Ultras are using us to lure the Empire in. Some were stunned by Aegon's words. Others remained calm, proof that they'd considered this possibility too, especially Phoenix. The last War of Light happened on Imperial soil. Back then, it was the Ultras who struck first. This time, they want the opposite. A war that drags the Empire into their lands. And what better way to make that happen? Don't get me wrong. We are dangerous to them because of our class's potential. But right now, we're just a secondary target. The fact that they haven't hit us with a real force yet proves it. So far, their only real encounter had been upon arrival, and even then the enemy was weak. They had won easily. Who knows? Aegon added with a sly grin. Maybe the war has already begun while we're sitting here wasting time. Aegon might be right. Phoenix spoke, confirming the idea. The elite class was made up of heirs to the great families, the crown champion of the church, children of the top guilds. To save them, it wouldn't be far-fetched for the Empire to launch an all-out assault on the Ultras. That might be why we haven't been attacked yet. This is our only chance. Somewhere above the vast continent of the Ultras, a war might already be raging to rescue them. We need to take advantage of their strongest forces being elsewhere, and escape while we can. If they didn't, they might end up leading the Empire into a trap that could destroy them all. We move immediately and preppa. Phoenix was about to issue the command, but his voice caught in his throat. Everyone's expressions shifted in an instant. The ground shook violently beneath them, as if a catastrophic earthquake had struck. Phoenix felt every hair on his body stand on end. He could barely stay on his feet under the crushing pressure that descended upon them. The rest of the students weren't as fortunate. Most collapsed to the ground under the overwhelming aura. Enemy? 1, 2, no, too many. Ghost screamed, trying to count or locate the threat. But it was useless. The suppressive aura came from multiple directions, and terrifyingly, it had encircled them completely. At that moment, Phoenix exploded with power, his eyes burning red as he shot into the air like a flaming arrow, forcing the pressure off his body with sheer strength. The Lord of the Sunlight had entered battle mode, ready to strike at any moment. But even he froze midair, as his eyes fell upon the scene below. What the hell is this? Phoenix muttered in disbelief as he stared at the sheer size of the army surrounding the city. It was a vast force, unlike anything he had seen before. They had encircled the entire city, trapping it from every direction. But the problem wasn't just the numbers. It was the names leading them. The 4 lords of the Ultras stood at the front, with none other than Godfrey, Gavid Lindman at their head. The infamous Hollows he had only heard of in stories were here too. Ludwig, Smuff, the Blood Queen Evelyn, all of them unleashed their devastating auras, crushing the earth and tearing the walls apart with their mere presence. At the very front, an elegant woman in a wide dress floated in the air, smiling brightly. Faced with such overwhelming force, and the witch Beatrice herself, Phoenix felt something he had never known before: despair. He was staring at the full power of the Ultras, and they had appeared from nowhere. Had it been a single lord, he might have dealt with it. Even 2, he could have found a way. But this many? No human in the Empire could handle a force like this alone. At that moment, his eyes met Beatrice's, as she hovered high above the city. With grace, the witch raised a black wand and took a stance that resembled that of an orchestra conductor. Welcome to the witch's game. She waved her wand lightly, and the aura behind her took on a physical form. Forge me a weapon to slaughter my enemies. As her voice rang out, an entire arsenal of cannons and machine guns materialized behind her out of thin air. In this game, everyone will finally get the chance to fulfill their ambitions. The barrage began without warning. The weapons roared to life, bombarding the city in a relentless hailstorm of bullets and explosions. Phoenix acted instantly. He manipulated his flames, forming a massive dome of fire that shielded himself and the elite students below from the assault. But the city didn't stand a chance. Buildings crumbled, walls shattered. Everything was reduced to rubble as bullets rained like a storm. Those fated to survive will survive, and those fated to die shall perish. Beatrice spun her wand again. Crush my enemies. Smash them to dust. With her chant, the sky split open. A massive gate formed in the heavens, and from it descended hundreds of enormous legs and feet, slamming down vertically at terrifying speed. They struck with such devastating force that the city was erased. Nothing remained of its once great walls and towers, nothing but Phoenix's protective fire dome. Beneath the dome, Fry and the others remained unharmed, but barely. At the same time, the army began to march forward, and the pressure from their auras only grew heavier. Didn't you say we were just bait? Danzo screamed, furious enough to want to punch Aegon, but too paralyzed by the oppressive power crushing down on them to act. Though he'd already armed himself with his shield, he couldn't move a muscle. The witch's assault had left them overwhelmed. Still floating in the sky, Beatrice smirked as she twirled her wand once more. "So you like using fire, do you?" She grinned as she stared down at Phoenix, who had blocked her first attack. "Then drown, all of you. Drown for me." Once again, a supernatural phenomenon unfolded. The sky turned into an ocean. A massive wave, wild and furious, surged from above Beatrice, crashing downward to consume everything. Chapter 333. The Witch's Gambit, 2. Fry and the others watched in horror as the ultras closed in and a deluge loomed above. Phoenix clenched his teeth as the tidal wave threatened to swallow them whole. With a devastating punch, he unleashed the full force of the Eternal Flame technique. A blazing inferno shot upward, clashing head-on with the torrent. Fire and water collided in a battle of titanic forces, each pushing to consume the other. The tide kept coming, and Phoenix kept countering, locked in a grueling struggle. Then, "Let's fight!" Snow roared, drawing Vermithor, ready to charge into battle. But a thunderous shout from Phoenix stopped him cold.
"No!"
Phoenix was barely holding back Beatrice's assault. But what truly terrified him were the Lords and Hollows who had yet to make their move. The backup plan. Do it now, Selena! He knew it. Fighting the Ultras head-on meant death for everyone. That's why they had prepared a contingency. Selena immediately understood what Phoenix meant. Without hesitation, she began casting. In an instant, glowing marks ignited across everyone's bodies, teleportation seals that Selena had placed earlier. "I'm initiating the mass teleportation now." Everyone turned to her, expressions mixed with shock and resolve. They all knew what was coming. They had discussed this moment before. And now the time had come. "I can't teleport everyone at once, so it'll have to be random." Teleportation magic was among the most difficult to master, and Selena hadn't perfected it yet. The best she could manage was to scatter everyone randomly. It would save them from immediate annihilation, but at a cost. "You'll be on your own from now on. Stay strong, and stay alive," Phoenix shouted just before the radiant light of teleportation engulfed him. Scattered across the vast lands of the Ultras, each student would be transported to a different location. They'd be alone, but that was still better than dying at the hands of an army like this. They had made a mistake thinking they were safe, that the Ultras wouldn't truly come after them. Now they had to pay for that mistake. In that moment of chaos, no one noticed the twisted smile curling on Beatrice's face. And within seconds, everyone disappeared, vanishing one after another in random flashes of light. But at the very last moment, something strange happened. Selena, caught mid-cast, noticed one of the elite students resisting her spell. Not just resisting, nullifying it completely. There was only one person who could have done that. "Fry! What are you doing?" She screamed at him, shocked to see that he alone remained. Fry gave her a calm smile. "Sorry. I'm not leaving." "No!" Selena's cry was the last thing he heard before she, too, vanished into light, teleported away like the rest. And then Fry was alone, standing in the middle of the destroyed city. He let out a deep breath. Looks like the ability worked just fine. Opening his system interface, Fry deactivated his skill. Anti-magic, level 2. Allows the user to nullify spells cast within a 5-meter radius. Since returning from Launder and wearing the nameless mask, Frey's ability had evolved. Now he could cancel magic without needing to touch the caster. He hadn't needed to use it until now, and it had proven invaluable. Well then, he exhaled and leapt onto a pile of rubble, moving toward the army that had surrounded him, each step driving him deeper into the crushing weight of their aura. "Shall we begin?" Beatrice hovered in satisfaction as the elite class vanished, scattered across the continent. And with that, everyone is now on their own. She smiled and slowly returned to the Ultra's forces waiting nearby. "This body did quite well," she said, admiring her performance. She seemed completely content, until she felt something approaching from the ruins. The witch turned, and so did the entire army. "Oh? What do we have here?" Beatrice grinned as she saw a lone figure climb atop the wreckage, standing tall above the shattered cityscape. It was Fry Starlight. He looked down at the massive army gathered before him, his violet eyes glowing darkly. The crushing pressure almost forced him to his knees. Every cell in his body screamed for him to flee, but he didn't move. Instead, he cleared his throat and drew on his aura, amplifying his voice. Taking a deep breath, he roared, "My name is Fry Starlight." His voice thundered across the battlefield, rising even above the deafening sound of the army below. "Lord of House Starlight, son of Abraham Starlight." Of all the things he could have said, he chose to introduce himself. Beatrice responded with a playful smile. "My name is Beatrice, the Eternal Witch. Pleased to meet you, son of Abraham." She floated forward, her smile widening. "You're quite bold, Fry Starlight. Or maybe just stupid. Who knows?" She laughed, while Fry remained silent. "Why didn't you run, Fry Starlight?" With each word, her aura intensified, the pressure threatening to crush him completely. "Perhaps you have a death wish?" She wasn't entirely wrong. What Fry had done was close to suicide. Yet, the young Lord of House Starlight said nothing. Instead, he drew his swords, Balerion and the Dark Sister, and unleashed his full power. He devoured the aura from his inner sea, pushing his body to the brink of explosion. Only then could he finally breathe, relieving some of the pressure weighing him down. "You asked if I wanted to die." Fry spoke in his usual calm tone as he stepped off the pile of rubble, walking straight toward the massive army ahead. A crooked smile stretched across his face. "Death? Yes, I've wished for it. More than once. But those above didn't want me dead. They wanted me alive, to entertain them until the very end." "What are you talking about?" Beatrice narrowed her eyes, clearly confused. But Fry wasn't speaking to her. He seemed to be speaking to himself, or perhaps to something else entirely. "You down here, on the other hand, you want me dead, as soon as possible. That's the contradiction, isn't it? Between the ones above who demanded his survival, and those below who craved his death, Fry had made a decision. He too would play the game. A game where the price was his life. "I'm tired of dancing to the same rhythm." His aura erupted violently, and a monstrous grin tore across his face, ear to ear. Who would interfere this time? Who would dare claim it was all part of their plan? The ones above, the ones below, and you, the so-called Eternal Witch. "Come at me, all of you." The ground exploded beneath Frey's feet as he launched himself forward. Fry Starlight charged headfirst into Beatrice and the entire Ultra's army, declaring the start of a suicidal battle. Chapter 334. Fry Starlight vs. Beatrice. 1. Fry Starlight's POV. When I stood before the Ultra's army, I thought I'd feel a storm of emotions. Fear from an army that embodied the full might of the Ultras. Regret over the suicidal decision I had just made. Terror at the unknown fate I was about to march into. But to my surprise, I didn't feel any of that. Despite the overwhelming number of enemies, foes unlike any I had ever faced, my mind was calm, my senses sharper than ever. A blazing fire surged in my chest. Anticipation. A thrill that set my blood alight as I took that first step into the unknown. The step that might finally sever the threads of fate wound around this body. A body that was never truly mine to begin with. I knew the odds of dying were high, but I didn't care. I wanted this. To die, maybe, but only after taking as many of those bastards with me as I could. With every ounce of strength my body could muster, I lunged toward the witch who had ambushed us before. Beatrice. That was her name. I'd never heard it before, but that didn't matter. I intended to kill her in a single blow. With Dark Sister in hand, I surged forward at full speed, aiming straight for her neck. Beatrice didn't flinch. That calm smile never left her face. She didn't move an inch. Then, just before my blade could connect, space itself shattered between us, as if the air had turned to glass and cracked apart. So much bloodlust. You really intend to face us all alone? She laughed, unfazed. I didn't waste time responding. I slashed at her immediately with Balerion. My blade passed cleanly through her body, slicing her in half. But it was only smoke. Her slender form dispersed into a cloud of white mist, vanishing before my eyes. The real Beatrice reappeared below, clapping her hands in amusement. So strong, and so young. How delightful. Whoosh! Like a black arrow, I lunged again, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Beatrice, now holding her black wand once more, simply whispered, "Bind him for me." In an instant, dozens of golden chains wrapped around me, locking me in place. Where the hell did these chains come from? I was stunned. I hadn't even sensed them until it was too late. You're quite rude, Fry Starlight, trying to carve up a beautiful lady like me. She raised her wand again and spoke sweetly. Rip him apart for me. Without warning, countless blades and spears appeared midair, surrounding me on all sides. They shot forward, aiming to pierce and shred me to pieces. In response, I unleashed my aura at full force, obliterating the golden chains, and deflected every single weapon with a barrage of sword strikes so fast they were invisible to the naked eye. I had barely repelled her attack when she summoned something else. A massive mirror appeared right in front of me. Look closely, Fry Starlight. Beatrice spoke while holding the mirror from behind. Inside the tall, rectangular frame, my reflection began to take shape. Your face, your body, your soul. Her smile widened, and then my eyes opened wide in shock. The mirror cracked. A hand emerged from it, one holding a black sword. Kill him for me. The mirror shattered completely, and from its shards stepped out my reflection. A perfect copy, except for the lifeless look in its eyes. It vanished for a moment, then reappeared right in front of me, swinging its swords. Boom! Our blades clashed. Once, twice. Then dozens of black slashes followed as we exchanged attacks in a whirlwind of violence. What shocked me most was how flawlessly the clone mimicked my abilities. What's wrong? Struggling against your own self? Beatrice called out, watching from a distance with a smirk, fueling my frustration. Worse still, the clone was matching me blow for blow. Enraged, I abruptly increased my speed, slipping past the clone in a flash and setting my sights on Beatrice. 10,000 steps of shadow, black star. I summoned a massive amount of dark aura and released a beam of pure shadow, one powerful enough to consume her entirely. But she didn't even move. Instead, she calmly raised her wand. Stop this attack for me. Boom! The darkness exploded, engulfing her completely, shattering everything in the surrounding area. But she emerged from the darkness unscathed, a strange sphere-shaped barrier surrounding her completely, a shield strong enough to neutralize my full-powered strike. There was no time to be impressed. My damn clone lunged at me again, relentless in its pursuit. Engaged in this vicious duel, a question echoed in my mind. How is she doing this? Beatrice's abilities were overwhelming, manifesting out of nowhere, one after the other. To achieve something of this magnitude required an absurd amount of aura. It made me wonder, just how powerful was this witch named Beatrice? Where was all this power coming from? As if reading my thoughts, Beatrice answered herself. Confused, aren't you? With another flick of her wand, she distorted reality once more. Kill him for me. With that command, dozens of pale white ghosts took form, each one a twisted version of Beatrice herself. They shrieked with lunatic laughter as they dove toward me all at once. Boom! At the same time, my clone kept pressuring me with relentless strikes, pushing me into a corner. This is real magic, Fry Starlight. Explosions erupted everywhere as both the ghosts and the clone tried to tear me apart. Phenomena that human minds were never meant to comprehend. Boom! One of the ghosts exploded in my face the moment I slashed it, sending me flying across the ground. But the attacks didn't stop. If you can understand my magic, then is it even magic anymore? On one side, the clone wielded my skills with perfect form. On the other, the ghosts acted like walking time bombs. And amidst that chaos, amidst the ever-shifting battlefield beneath my feet, a realization struck me. Why aren't they attacking? I glanced toward the Ultra's army that continued to pressure me with their overwhelming aura. All those lords, all those monstrous hollows, not a single one of them had moved. I had been holding back, saving my strength, thinking the real fight hadn't started yet. But now, it had been far too long since the battle began. And they were still just watching. Were they toying with me? Giving me time before they tore me apart? Or were they standing aside out of respect for the witch who engaged me? Boom! Beatrice's onslaught continued without pause. I had only been defending, unable to go on the offensive. Caught in a storm of dust and exploding aura, I narrowed my eyes at the Ultra's army. I came here for a battle of life and death. The ground trembled beneath me, reacting to the surge of aura that flooded out of my body. And for the first time in this battle, Beatrice's expression changed. To shatter the threads of fate that bind me, do you dare retreat from me now? There was no point in delaying this any longer. Blood form. Without warning, I unleashed the strongest state of Balerion, amplifying it even further using Dark Sister. The force that erupted from this combination sent a massive wave of aura in all directions, blasting back both the clone and the surrounding ghosts. Out of my way! My swords moved at inhuman speed, creating afterimages as I unleashed dozens of black slashes, cutting the clone to pieces and triggering the detonation of every remaining ghost. All of it unfolded under the eyes of the astonished witch. This aura! He's at the level of an SS-ranked awakened. Ignoring her words and riding the momentum, I leapt forward in a single motion, instantly closing the distance to the Ultra's army. If you won't come to me, then I'll come to you. My blades ignited with a surge of dark aura that billowed upward, shrouding a huge part of the sky. 10,000 steps of shadow, infinite darkness. With a dual slash, the wave of dark aura tore through the entire Ultra's army, shredding everything beneath it. I had poured my full strength into that attack. Aura strong enough to threaten even an SS rank warrior and force them to take me seriously. I waited for their response, but the reaction I expected never came. Instead, what happened was something I couldn't have imagined. The lords of the Ultras, the monstrous hollows that had been exerting crushing pressure since the beginning of the battle, they all shattered into pieces the moment the attack touched them. Eyes wide open, I stared at the army reduced to dust. Nothing left but ash and a crater of destruction left by my assault. The very army that once made me tremble. The same force that drove us to scatter across the continent in desperation had been completely obliterated. And then came the sound, the hysterical laughter of a mad witch who had completely lost her mind. Hee hee. I slowly turned toward Beatrice, who was laughing uncontrollably, arms wrapped around her body, her face flushed red. What the hell is that twisted laugh for?
Ah, forgive-me, forgive-me.
I just couldn't resist the look on your face. Shocking, isn't it? What is the meaning of this? I asked, my voice seething with anger. Was it all fake? The Ultra's army? The lords? The hollows? I know what you're thinking, Fry Starlight, and yes, you're right. It was all an illusion.
Impossible.
I shouted without thinking. Not for a second had I suspected that everything I saw was fake. It didn't make sense. That crushing pressure we all felt earlier, it wasn't imaginary. It was real. Even Phoenix, with his heightened senses, felt it. That's why he decided to retreat. It's called magic, dear Fry. Just magic. What are you talking about? Still smiling, Beatrice raised her delicate hand, pulling back the sleeve of her elegant dress to reveal her pale skin. With a touch of her aura, that flawless skin vanished, replaced by a hideous, scarred hand etched with dozens of strange runes and overlapping magic circles layered on top of one another. Magic is nothing but tricks we sorcerers cast to distort reality. You don't know how easy it is to manipulate human senses. Fry Starlight. She blew out a puff of cold air. The moment it touched my face, I felt a chill brush my skin. Then, she blew again. But this time it was warm. I could feel the heat from her breath. See? Just like that. With a flick of her wand, a shimmering sphere of pure aura formed around her. Illusion isn't limited to what you see. It goes much deeper than that. All I had to do was tamper with your senses. Make you believe you were being attacked by an army of ultras. That alone was enough to trigger your contingency plan and force your little team to scatter on their own. You're more naive than I thought, dear elites. Beatrice's words left me speechless. She had manipulated us with surgical precision. She knew every step of our plan, down to the emergency teleportation strategy. That's impossible. For her to know that there could only be one explanation. Beatrice, this mysterious which I knew nothing about, had been watching us from the beginning. She pulled our strings, made us dance to her rhythm, and drove us to separate across the continent of the Ultras. All of that with nothing but illusions and a few spells. It was at that moment I realized, this which was dangerous. You! With a terrifying thirst for blood, I unleashed my full killing intent. You're going to die here. I couldn't let a monster like her continue to exist. Not after witnessing what she was capable of. Beatrice, still smiling darkly, twirled her wand in the air. The only one dying today is you, Lord Starlight. Chapter 335. Fry Starlight versus Beatrice. 2. She cast a new spell that twisted the ground beneath me into something unnatural. Swallow him for me. As her words echoed, the earth turned into the gaping maw of a monstrous beast trying to consume me whole. But I didn't even blink. My eyes were locked solely on her. Swoosh! A gust of wind erupted. In less than a second, I slashed through the summoned beast, turning it into chunks with one clean motion. My attacks left behind nothing but streaks of dark aura, so fast they blurred into shadows. The very next moment, Beatrice's head flew into the air, a thin black aura line marking where my blade had cleaved through. But the body dissolved again into a puff of smoke. She reappeared in the distance. Not bad at all, Fry Starlight. Boom! I didn't waste time with words. I dashed at her again, blades ready. Tear him apart for me, she cried once more, warping reality again. This time, she summoned dozens of giant snakes from the void, massive serpents capable of devouring me in a single bite. So many that they completely obscured my view of Beatrice. But it didn't matter. Slash! In under a second, the snakes were diced into tiny pieces by a flurry of slashes too fast for the eye to follow. Without pause, I continued the attack, appearing behind Beatrice and cleaving her in two. She couldn't even follow my movement. And again, her body turned to smoke. Again. There's no point in what you're doing, Fry Starlight. Beatrice twirled her wand once more. You can't defeat magic unless you uncover the trick behind it. This time, she cast a much stronger spell. Like the illusion spell earlier, you managed to dispel it because you broke the core. But you won't do it again. Kill him for me. With a single command. Dozens of mirrors materialized around me in a perfect circle. And from within each one, stepped out a replica of myself. Every single one of them drew their swords and charged toward me, surrounding me on all sides. Chaos erupted as I sprinted at incredible speed, with dozens of doppelgangers chasing me down. Blades aimed to kill. They were strong, so strong I felt as if I were fighting my true self. And yet, for some reason, not one of them could touch me. Swoosh! I dodged their strikes with precision, parrying the few I couldn't evade. At the same time, I retaliated with a flurry of attacks, destroying replica after replica. All of this played out in front of Beatrice, who watched my every move. What's with this bizarre fighting style? After trading blows for a while, I finally understood why I was able to handle them so easily. In the end, you're just poor imitations of me. Copies that mimicked my mastered movements perfectly. And that triggered my strongest passive ability. Shadow Adaptation 3-7. A mirage-like aura of darkness shimmered around my body as I dismantled the clones with terrifying precision and speed. Thanks to Shadow Adaptation, I'd become fully resistant to their attacks, allowing me to dominate the fight so thoroughly that I even managed to launch a shadow arc at Beatrice mid-battle. She dissolved into smoke the moment it struck her. I can't get close to her. Every time I tried, she vanished like magic. I thought my speed would be enough, but it wasn't. I had to try something else. But the damned clones kept coming. Beatrice kept summoning mirror after mirror until the battle turned into a brutal war of attrition. It was clear she wanted to wear me down. And not knowing how much aura she had left, playing her game was a terrible idea. So I decided to end it with my next strike. Playtime's over. I raised both the Dark Sister and Balerion at once. My skin cracked, revealing glowing purple lines beneath, raging with volatile energy. Surrounded by dozens of my own copies, with Beatrice weaving through them behind the lines, I chose to obliterate everything with a single, all-out attack. Drawing in a monstrous surge of aura, I roared. A blinding light burst from my blades, illuminating the dark night sky and swallowing everything around me. Beatrice stood frozen, stunned by the sheer magnitude of the blast. Boom! A deafening explosion shattered the earth, and a towering pillar of aura pierced the heavens, annihilating every mirror and clone Beatrice had created. Within moments, the light faded. What remained was a massive crater, an ocean of ruin scorched into the wastelands of the Ultra's continent. At the center of it all, I stood alone, surrounded by nothing but silence, smoke, and destruction. Huff! I let out a breath, steadying myself as I rose to my feet. I checked my body, tired, but intact. My aura pathways. They can finally withstand ignition. I was no longer at risk of collapsing after using it once. Relieved, I scanned the area. There was no one left in sight. I thought it was over, but in that very moment, everything changed. I felt the sharp sting of a blade piercing my back. Warm blood spilled onto the ground as a thin sword slid out through my chest, stabbing me directly through the heart. The world flipped on its head, and I could barely hear the voice behind me. Kikikiki, still so naive, Fry Starlight. Slowly, I dropped to one knee, pain surging through my body. That was a spectacular attack, truly, but you're too naive. Did you forget? Techniques like that don't affect my body. Beatrice spoke with a confident smile as she left the blade lodged in my chest. As expected. She possessed some kind of magic that constantly protected her physical body, making it nearly impossible to harm her. Ignition hadn't hit her at all. She simply waited until my guard was down, then struck with surgical precision. How tragic, Fry Starlight, for such talent to go to waste. It seems your fate was to die like this after all. She spoke with certainty, and I could only smile through the pain, one hand touching the sword buried in my chest. Yeah, it would have been a shame to die here. Slay Ash. Ha! It was almost laughable. How quickly the tide of battle could change. Beatrice could only let out a sharp gasp, her eyes wide with disbelief, as her body was cleaved clean in half at the torso. Blood sprayed across the battlefield, painting the ground. On the other side, I rose to my feet, gripping the thin sword that had pierced through my chest and yanking it out with a strained breath. Beatrice, now lying on the ground, stared at me in utter shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. How am I magic? Standing over her, I stared down coldly, my chest still bleeding, a gaping wound in the center of it. Just who exactly do you think I am? There was no way I would ever let myself die here. I'm Fry Starlight, son of Abraham Starlight. Damn it, I coughed up blood as I focused all my strength on healing. There's no way I'm dying like this. With a bitter smirk, I glanced at the system window in front of me. Anti-magic, level 2, activated. From the beginning of this fight, I'd been unable to get close to Beatrice no matter how fast or hard I tried. She kept spreading illusions, constantly veiling her true body and forcing me to chase phantoms. So instead, I dropped my guard on purpose right after using ignition. She must have thought I was exhausted, vulnerable after such a powerful attack. And so, she walked right into the trap. The moment she stepped within 5 meters of me, I activated anti-magic, instantly stripping her of all magical protections. You should never have judged me by the standards of ordinary humans, eternal witch Beatrice. I pointed at the hole in my chest, which was already starting to close. As you can see, I don't go down that easily. Not when I had a body that could regenerate like some sort of mythical beast. Beatrice, now severed in half and stripped of all her magic, could do nothing but stare up at me from the dirt as I raised my sword over her face. With one last smile, she whispered her final words, just before I drove Balerion down into her skull, shattering it completely. Magnificent! And with that, the witch who had manipulated us from the shadows finally perished. But the worst was far from over. All the elite students had now been scattered, each stranded somewhere across this cursed land. I need to move. With a long breath, I dragged my battered body away from the ruins of the battlefield, leaving Beatrice's corpse behind. This is only the beginning of the war, a war no one could predict. With turbulent thoughts and heavy steps, I pushed forward into the desolate plain, in search of the others, each of whom was now fighting a war of their own. Chapter 336. The Witch's Game 1. The tea party. It was ironic. A breathtaking garden, adorned with flowers of every shape and color, blooming in the heart of a continent reduced to lifeless desert. The witch's garden had always been an enigma, a dreamlike place whispered about across the Ultras continent. But only a select few were ever granted the honor of stepping inside. Among them, Simon Manus had been the most frequent guest, thanks to their shared eccentricities, which allowed the two to sit for hours, talking without a hint of boredom. Now, Simon sat quietly at Beatrice's game table, unmoving, eyes closed, as if awaiting something inevitable. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait long. A faint smile curved his lips as he opened his eyes, meeting the gaze of the pale-skinned woman with long black hair now seated across from him. She wore an elegant dress of black and violet, her expression darkened by annoyance as she glared at him with violet eyes. Well, what do we have here? Looks like someone suffered a spectacular failure. Simon's voice was thick with mockery as he leaned forward, elbows on the table. Beatrice rested her chin on one hand, turning away with a pout.
No.
The plan worked perfectly. Oh? Then why didn't you bring back your other body? Isn't it your favorite? She remained silent, her face reddening slightly as she turned further away. She mumbled something under her breath, barely audible. Speak up, woman. You know I'm hard of hearing. I died. Louder. He pressed further until she finally snapped. I died. That damned puppet got destroyed. All right? Happy now? Now that is unexpected. Our dear Beatrice. Defeated after all that boasting and meticulous planning. I wasn't defeated. The game's still ongoing. Simon couldn't help but laugh. Opportunities to tease the eternal which were rare, and too precious to waste. I wonder, who did it? Was it Phoenix? I wouldn't be surprised. He's strong enough to beat most lords and hollows. It wasn't Phoenix. Beatrice's answer cut through the air, making Simon pause in surprise. You're telling me you lost to one of the Empire's children? She gave a slow nod. That's right. Her confirmation only deepened Simon's confusion. I know your homunculus copies aren't as powerful as your real body, but to lose to a mere child. He's not just any child. Beatrice's lips curled into a faint smile as she recalled the battle. His name is Fry Starlight. When he fights seriously, he can rival SS rank Awakened. And that's not all. He possesses bizarre abilities I've never seen before. She leaned back in her chair, her expression pensive. He can nullify magic somehow. My magic. Something no one in this world has ever been able to suppress. Vanished completely the moment I got close to him. Not to mention those two burning swords of his. His strikes could obliterate entire battlefields. She paused, eyes distant. It's likely he was the one who interrupted the teleportation trap. To my knowledge, there's no method to alter a teleportation gate's destination from inside the gate itself, Simon said while stroking his beard. That's what I thought too, but clearly we were wrong. Had he used some kind of tool? Even if so, no such tool was known to exist. This is troublesome. Another monster talent has emerged within the Empire. If Fry could unleash such power at this age, how far could he rise? Perhaps a calamity on the scale of Abraham Starlight himself. As Simon sank deeper into those grim thoughts, he noticed Beatrice smiling unconsciously. Hey, what's with that cursed grin?
Ah, pardon me.
Beatrice quickly composed herself. I just got a little too excited. With someone like him in the mix, the game will only become more fun. Simon burst out laughing. You're truly insane. Hehe. And you're insufferable. She pouted again, fiddling with the small toys laid out on the table. But I did lose a lot today. I really liked that puppet. She was my finest one. That's entirely your fault. You should have just gone with your real body. No matter how advanced your homunculus are, they'll never channel your highest tier spells. With a long sigh, Beatrice reset her odd chessboard. I know I would have won if I used my real body, but I won't. The Mad Witch lifted a chess piece shaped like a queen and waved it mockingly in Simon's face. Her expression one of theatrical sarcasm. No matter how hard you try, you filthy old pervert, I'll never let you see my real body. Bah! Who'd want to see that rotten thing? My interest lies solely in your dolls. Which is exactly why you're a pervert. The two bickered for hours, their strange relationship blurring the lines between friendship and something entirely other. Simon never once dared cross the line. Beatrice had never shown him her true form, not even once. After all, how many Awakened could hope to survive against an SS Plus rank witch? Those were the thoughts running through the mind of the Hollow, the puppet master Simon Manus, as he gazed at the whimsical woman who only moved when her twisted whims demanded it. And unfortunately for everyone else, the children of the Empire had become her latest obsession. The desolate plains of the Ultras continent, a land that had devoured life, leaving behind only hunger and death. Under the shadow of night, a flickering glow dashed across the cursed earth, vanishing and reappearing in flashes of movement. Void Step. Snow muttered the name of his skill as he traversed vast distances, his face tight with determination. Everything had happened so fast. The ambush, the chaos, the forced separation scattered them across the deadly continent. Snow quickly realized how dire the situation truly was, especially with several weak links among the elite class. Some of them wouldn't survive out here alone. They must be close by. Using Void Step again and again, Snow scoured the wastelands without direction, wondering if the decision they made back then had been a mistake. But it was too late now. Facing the entire Ultras army head-on would have been suicide, an express ticket to annihilation. Despite everything, the Church's golden prodigy tried to remain optimistic, even as he sprinted for hours, finding no sign of life, only endless silence. It made him wonder, was this land even more lifeless than the Nightmare Lands? Eventually, his solitude came to an end. After dozens of teleportations, Snow stopped abruptly, eyes narrowing. A tent. In the distance, a massive tent stood tall, surrounded by several others and flanked by black flags flapping violently in the wind. As he approached, he realized it wasn't just one tent. It was an entire city of them, arranged like a traveling circus. At the camp's entrance, a weathered sign read, "Black Flag." The name felt oddly fitting, but what truly stunned him was what lay inside. For the first time since entering the Ultras continent, Snow laid eyes on something he never expected. People. Real, living humans. Not twisted mutations. Not deformed beasts. Actual men and women, walking and talking, moving from shop to stall amidst crumbling walls and canvas shelters. Snow quickly cloaked himself in a black hooded robe, one he'd taken from a fallen Ultra's corpse, and slipped among the crowd. His top priority was to find his companions. If they weren't here, then perhaps he could at least uncover clues about long-range teleportation gates, their only way home. Blending into the crowd was surprisingly easy. The inhabitants came and went in cycles, indifferent to a lone newcomer. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Ordinary humans trying to live in the heart of death itself. Snow dared to hope. Perhaps he'd finally found a haven in this forsaken wasteland. Chapter 337. The Witch's Game, 2. Snow made his way toward the largest tent. If there were answers, they'd be in there. He slipped in silently. What greeted him was not a clue, but a deafening roar. Cheers erupted around him as blinding lights struck from above, illuminating the inside of the tent in a dazzling spectacle. The space had been magically soundproofed. No noise reached the outside. Inside, the air was dense with sweat and blood. Unlike the shrouded figures outside, the people here bared their faces. Their skin dry and cracked, their features sharp and worn like they were all suffering from a chronic illness. Every eye in the crowd was locked on the center ring. A massive arena. Lit by piercing lights, the ring served as a battlefield. Inside, two towering, nearly naked men clashed with oversized spears, fighting like rabid animals. Their movements were brutal and unrefined. All offense, no defense. They struck each other without hesitation, slamming weapons into flesh again and again, until blood soaked the arena and their bodies became unrecognizable pulps of mangled meat. With every clash between the two giants, the crowd erupted in louder cheers, urging them to fight with even greater brutality. And in just a few short minutes, one of the behemoths collapsed, slain after a savage and gruesome duel. The victor roared at the top of his lungs, declaring his triumph. As soon as the match ended, an even brighter spotlight focused on the center of the arena, revealing a strange man stepping forward. He wore a black mask and circus-like garments, spreading his arms dramatically toward the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, the battle is over. Do you know what that means?" His voice, amplified with aura, boomed through the tent, and the crowd answered in thunderous unison. "Feeding time." At their shout, the masked man effortlessly hurled the fallen giant's corpse high into the air. With a gleaming blade, he performed a dizzying flourish, slicing the massive body into chunks of raw flesh that rained down upon the arena like crimson hail. Limbs, guts, chest, even the face. The moment those human remains hit the ground, the crowd descended into madness. Men and women alike threw themselves into a frenzied brawl, biting, clawing, stabbing each other for scraps of meat. They tore one another apart for a taste of what they considered a delicacy. And all of it happened right before Snow's eyes. He watched, his expression grim. This wasn't a battle. His golden gaze scanned the arena, piecing everything together at last. These people came here to eat. It was then that Snow realized just how naive he had been. The crowd devoured the human meat like starving beasts. And once the supply was gone, they turned on each other, consumed by their hunger. Man or woman, it didn't matter. They fought, they killed, they fed on each other like monsters. Then, when it was finally over and their bloodied faces had feasted, they cheered and danced and sang as if nothing had happened. They ate, they drank, they celebrated, even engaged in public acts of depravity without shame.
Bora.
Wild. Like animals. For the first time in his life, Snow felt true despair for humanity. There was nothing for him here, nothing but rot. Turning away, he prepared to leave that wretched place behind. But he stopped. Something caught his eye. Something he couldn't ignore. He was fine enduring the horror. Fine with the adults. But what he saw next crossed a line he could not forgive. As he turned to leave, Snow spotted a hulking man. More beast than human. Towering over a small child who looked no older than 6. The man threw the boy to the ground and began beating him savagely. The boy was tiny, curled up on himself, impossible to notice amidst the chaos. His screams were drowned by the noise of the crowd, leaving him utterly defenseless. "Hey!" The brute froze. Snow had appeared at his side. "Huh? What the hell do you want?" "Ugh!" With a single backhanded blow, Snow sent the man flying. His neck twisting a full 360 degrees before he crashed to the ground. "I messed it up." Snow knelt down, reaching out to help the child. The hero of the church had managed to ignore everything until now. But he couldn't turn his back on a single child. "Are you all right?" He extended a hand. The boy shakily rose, sobbing. His frail, naked form was covered only by a filthy white robe. Thank you, sir." Snow gave a faint nod, brushing the dirt and blood from the child's face. "Where is your family?" The boy lowered his head. I don't have one." "Orphaned, then?" Snow sighed, dusting off the grime from the boy's robe. But as he did, his eyes froze on a faint emblem stitched into the cloth. An emblem that made the air itself grow heavy, and darkened his face in an instant. "Yes, sir." The boy flinched as Snow suddenly grabbed the robe, eyes locked on the symbol. A dove, wings spread wide in freedom. It was the exact same dove engraved on the pendant that Snow had worn around his neck his entire life. "Yosefka." He whispered the name, stunned. "Sir, you know our orphanage." The boy's words confirmed it.
Impossible.
Golden eyes blazing with fury, Snow stumbled to his feet, staggered by what he'd just uncovered. He shouldn't be here. The orphanage. Yosefka orphanage. The one Snow had searched for across the empire for years. Why is he here? Among the ultras. Rage surged through Snow's veins as he clenched his teeth. That could only mean one thing. That bastard is here. "Hey there, pretty boy. What are you doing all alone?" Blinded by anger, Snow didn't notice the group of men who had surrounded him. "You're not from around here. Where'd you come from?" One muscular man wrapped his arm around Snow's neck and laughed mockingly. "Not that it matters. Why don't you come play with us for a bit?" "Your hand." Snow's voice was cold and flat. "What? Take your filthy hand off me." Despite Snow's slim build and composed tone, the killing intent he radiated was suffocating. The man's grin faded. He tightened his grip. "You've got a sharp tongue for someone so pretty. I'll make sure you—" Boom! Before anyone could react, before even the boy could blink, the man exploded into a crimson mist, blown apart by the radiant sword that had appeared in Snow's hand out of thin air. "I was trying to keep a low profile, make things easier for me and my friends." Boom! "But I've changed my mind." With another swing, the rest of the group were shredded, erased in a flash of light and blood. "All of you will die here." Consumed by pure wrath, Snow launched himself into the crowd. The wild party turned into a massacre. Every light that had once brightened the arena shattered, plunging the tent into pitch-black chaos. Screams of confusion erupted from the ultras. And in the heart of it all, one light remained. A glowing white sword, and 2 golden eyes burning with fury. Snow carved through them like a reaper. No mercy, no hesitation. Only death. The ultras scrambled to escape, trampling over one another in blind panic. But they couldn't outrun the vermithor blade. Not when it cleaved through them faster than they could breathe. The blood flowed like rivers. Most died by Snow's hand. The rest were crushed under the feet of their own. He didn't stop. Couldn't stop. That man, the one he had searched for all those years, was closer now than ever before. Snow had become a storm of death. When the lights flickered back to life, he stood alone in the ring. Soaked in blood, surrounded by heaps of torn, mangled corpses. Expression grim, he turned away. He could no longer bear the stench of that cursed place. But just as he walked past the bodies, something caught his eye. A small figure crushed under the weight of the stampede. The boy, the same boy he had saved, trampled to death in the chaos Snow himself had unleashed. Most likely the boy had screamed, but no one heard him. What makes me any different from him? The pig who beat him? Or Snow who got him killed? Which was worse? Damn it! Snow cursed under his breath and scanned the area. Where's their leader? The masked man. Snow just wanted to fight. To forget. To drown in blood and let go of everything he'd buried deep inside. But when he found the body of the masked man tossed in a corner, already dead, even that hope was gone. Burn in hell. With a single command, Snow ignited the entire tent. Flames erupted from the ground, setting the main structure ablaze. The ultras outside panicked, surrounding the burning tent in confusion and terror. Snow walked out through them. His body drenched in blood, his presence suffocating. No one dared move. No one dared breathe, because the killing intent he radiated was unbearable. He had come here searching for information, but what he found was something far worse. The shadows of his past. Memories buried deep within. The kind that clawed their way back from the abyss no matter how hard he tried to forget. The shadows of Yosefka. And within Snow's golden eyes, those memories flickered. Unwelcome. Unrelenting. Chapter 338. Snow Lionheart 1. Years passed, one after another, each carrying its own story. Some of those stories would remain forever in the dark, perhaps never to be told. For what belongs in the dark is sometimes better left there. But occasionally those tales surface, shedding light on yet another struggle. The Empire. An expansive realm that sheltered what remained of humanity when catastrophe clawed at its gates. While legends like Abraham Starlight and Mikar Valerian carved their names into history, others lived in peace, far from the chaos. On a stormy night, with winds howling across the land, a man walked alone beneath a pitch-black sky lit only by intermittent flashes of lightning. Far from cities and villages, he carried a child in his arms. His face somber, his steps heavy. The infant's wailing never ceased, a desperate cry harmonizing with the thunder above. The weary man glanced down at the child with snow-white hair. No sleep, no rest, doesn't eat, doesn't drink. A cursed child, through and through. He walked with slow, burdened steps. There was something hopeless in his demeanor. Perhaps this will count as penance for their wretched souls. Soon, the silhouette of a massive building came into view, rising through the mist and rain. Mourning the dead is pointless, but the living can still be judged. As he neared the towering structure, its grim facade unshaken by storm or wind, a rusted sign above its iron gates came into view. Yosefka Orphanage. He knelt and gently placed the child before the gate, casting a final glance at him. Then he turned away and walked back into the woods from where he had come. With bleak eyes, he drew out a rusted dagger and gripped it with both hands. And with a sorrowful smile, he plunged it into his throat, blood washing into the rain. Let this be atonement for all my sins. The man died, and the child lived, his cries the only sound left behind. But everything that had occurred was seen by someone. A tall, broad-shouldered figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in black. A round monocle framed his right eye. Wordlessly, he picked up the child in his arms. The dead man behind him was of no concern. Written on the baby's blanket was only a name, Snow Lionheart. The child, an offering to the soul of Yosefka. Time passed, the years rolled on, and the boy grew. Yosefka Orphanage had become home to many, a refuge for children who had lost their parents far too young. Among them, one stood out, a boy with white hair and golden eyes, gentle features, and a rare kind of beauty that drew the gaze of all who saw him. Snow Lionheart. He sat at his desk, hands folded, gazing forward alongside the other children at the woman teaching them in their modest classroom. She taught them how to read and write. For many of the orphans, the orphanage was their entire world, a world whose boundaries ended at the wrought iron fence. But they didn't mind. They were content with what they had. All of them adored the woman who nurtured, educated, and gave them everything they lacked in life. The vice director, known to all simply as Sister Annalise, though she had asked them to call her sister, to most of the children, she was truly a mother, especially to the white-haired boy with golden eyes, whose gaze never strayed from her, not even when so many other eyes were on him. After the lessons ended each day, the children would gather in a vast courtyard to play, rest, and enjoy their time. Many would naturally drift towards Snow Lionheart. At an age no older than 10, they still lived in their dreams, immersed in a rose-tinted childhood. Dreams of one day having a real family, a family from outside, or something even simpler, like falling in love. The children were naive when it came to such things, and it was clear that most of the girls in the orphanage were enamored with Snow, who looked more like an angel walking among mortals. That, of course, stirred jealousy and resentment among the boys, so much so that they often sought to pick fights with him. It was their childish way of standing out. If we beat up the pretty boy, we'll prove we're better. But reality shattered those fantasies. Snow Lionheart, the slender boy who looked prettier than most girls, crushed every single one of them. His movements were something far beyond their age, as if he had been born a master of martial arts. Anyone who challenged that boy ended up kissing the dirt in defeat. Their plans backfired horribly, only making Snow Lionheart more popular than ever. After each bitter fight, Snow would simply remain where he stood, as if waiting for something. And sure enough, within seconds, the orphanage guards would arrive, scolding the children and escorting them straight to the deputy director's office. That was exactly what Snow had been waiting for. They were always met with the same stern lecture from that lady, Sister Annalise. Mature, with fiery red hair and violet eyes like gemstones behind the spectacles she always wore due to her poor eyesight. Her features were so gentle that even when she scolded them, it never really felt like punishment. Once the lectures were over, the others would leave. All except him. "What is it? You can go now." Snow would shake his head and stay behind. "I want to stay and help." He said that often. Annalise sometimes tried to make him leave, but she always ended up giving in. While the other children played outside, Snow spent hours hovering around the deputy director. He did everything he could to help, bringing her the correct documents, assisting with small tasks. Things that would bore any child were welcomed by Snow, as long as they let him be close to her. When she finished her work, Annalise would often stroke his hair and pull him close. "You really are such a sweet child, Snow. Remember this. Always be a good, obedient boy, and you'll always get what you want." Snow nodded at every word, replying in a quiet voice, "Yes, mother." For a moment, Annalise froze at that last word. "No, Snow, you mustn't call me that. Just call me sister like the others, or deputy director." She sounded like she was reprimanding him, but her tender gaze and faint smile betrayed her words, rendering them meaningless. To Snow Lionheart, Annalise was a mother. She was his whole world, the only person who had ever been there for him since the earliest days he could remember. He had no real friends. For some reason, he kept his distance from everyone else. And so, he cherished every moment he spent with her. She filled the void left by the family he never had. Eventually, he left Annalise's office, only to bump into a man standing just outside the door. The young Snow stumbled back, hitting something that felt like iron rather than flesh. A tall man in priestly robes, with long messy black hair and the same type of reading glasses, perched on a face marked by two distinct scars. The director. This was the head of the Yosefka orphanage. With his large hand, the man gently patted Snow's head. That hand looked strong enough to crush him with ease, but he didn't. "Be obedient, and go play with the others." The deep voice spoke, eyes focused on Snow. Snow nodded quickly and darted away. "Yes, sir." The director watched him for a moment before stepping into Annalise's office. He was rarely seen around the orphanage. His presence was intimidating, yet he treated everyone with kindness. But Snow Lionheart could never truly accept him. Every time they met, every hair on his body stood on end, warning him. He was terrified of the man, though it didn't affect his life much. Yet, their daily routine was simple. Wake up early, study, play, then go to sleep. The only oddity was that one day of the week when all the children were gathered for what they called a medical session. They were told they were sick. So routinely, they sat in that vast room while a red substance was injected into their veins. Every time Snow saw it, he felt it wasn't medicine at all. It was blood. Blood from an unknown source. But it was Sister Annalise who administered the injections. And Snow trusted her blindly. He believed she would never give him anything that could harm him. So he accepted the injections willingly, letting the strange liquid blend with his blood. Some of the children ended up spending nights in the orphanage's infirmary due to side effects. But Snow never suffered from any, though he could feel the changes in his body. He often wondered what that substance truly was, what it had turned him into. Chapter 339. Snow Lionheart 2. Days passed. Snow followed the same daily routine for a long time. He didn't have many bonds, but he was observant. He noticed how the children began to vanish one by one, how they were essentially prisoners in the orphanage, never allowed beyond those iron fences. There was even an entire section of the orphanage they were forbidden to enter, the restricted grounds. All of it revealed cracks in what once seemed like their perfect world. What was really happening behind their backs? Did the world outside even know they existed? Snow often found himself wondering. He had awakened the ability to manipulate aura at a very young age, and was undeniably gifted. But the educational system within the orphanage had restricted him heavily, almost as if it didn't want him to grow stronger. His only solace was the time he spent with Vice Director Annalise. Curiosity grew within the young boy's heart each day, especially with the increasingly frequent disappearances of the orphanage children. At some point, it became a common occurrence, always followed by the arrival of new children to replace them. The teachers claimed they had been adopted or transferred to better places. Many considered them the lucky ones. But were they really? Later, upon reaching the age of 10, Snow began to be treated as someone special alongside a small group of children his age. That was when his doubts about the orphanage, and the strange substances being injected into his body, grew far stronger. Yet he had little to hold on to. The only constant he had was Miss Annalise. With her around, he felt he needed nothing else. And every time she embraced him, she would whisper the same words in his ear. Be a good boy, Snow. Be obedient, and everything will be all right. One day, she even gave him a necklace. A silver pendant shaped like a dove, a symbol of freedom. It was the same emblem used by the orphanage itself. But, was he really free? Snow had always known the answer was no. His curiosity deepened each day, driven by a need to uncover the truth. He had grown weary of all the quiet sobbing that followed whenever a child vanished without saying a word. But Annalise's words had always been enough to hold him back. Be a good boy, Snow. Be obedient, and everything will be all right. Yet how long could those words continue to restrain him? Not much longer. On a moonlit night, Snow snuck out of the bedroom, leaving the other children fast asleep. Despite their limited training, he could manipulate aura freely, allowing him to move swiftly and silently through the orphanage. The forbidden zone lay on the western side of the grounds. To reach it, he had to pass through quite a lot. The orphanage was practically a small city on its own. But Snow was gifted by nature, and within minutes, he reached that forbidden, shadowed section of the compound. He walked forward, step by cautious step. The area was dark, ominous. Gradually, he reached a wide hall at the end of the corridor, illuminated by faint green lights emanating from enormous glass containers. Driven by the urge to know, by the burning curiosity inside, Snow entered the room and was struck by a scene he never could have imagined. It was an old laboratory, filled with blood-stained instruments, beds covered in crimson, and the reek of death. That alone would have been enough to terrify any child, but something else seized his attention entirely. The massive containers. He approached them slowly, and then he froze, because he recognized what was inside. The boy trembled violently, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. Inside those cylindrical tubes were bloodied human body parts, arms, legs, severed limbs. But those weren't what frightened him most. It was the heads, severed, preserved heads, neatly arranged within the glass. They weren't just anyone. They weren't strangers. They were the children he had lived with for years under the same roof. They weren't exactly friends, but they had shared the same space, laughed, cried, played, and grown together. And now, their lifeless faces stared back at him from inside those tubes. The grotesque sight of those decapitated heads, paired with the stench of blood, was far too much for someone like Snow Lionheart, who had lived a peaceful life until now. He couldn't even scream. All he could do was tremble as his heart pounded violently in his chest. His instincts screamed at him to run, to leave now, but his thoughts were clouded. Fear ruled over logic. So instead of turning back, he ran deeper into the forbidden wing. Eventually, he arrived at a room thick with the scent of blood and death. What exactly was happening in this orphanage? Human experimentation? What kind of deranged mind had created this place? The answer awaited behind the door. It was slightly ajar. Snow pushed it open just enough to peek inside. The room was pitch black, lit only by a single lamp dangling from the ceiling, casting light on the center. There, lying on a small bed, was a girl who couldn't have been older than 8. Standing before her was the man who had terrified him for as long as he could remember. The director. The girl was still alive, but the light had long since vanished from her eyes. At that moment, the sound of Snow's chattering teeth could be heard. He was trembling more violently than ever before. The director slowly turned toward him. The girl lying on the bed before him had been half-eaten. Her right chest and stomach were completely gone, her blood pooling endlessly. Her blood covered the director's face and robes, and from between the scars above his right eye, additional glowing red eyes emerged, staring directly at Snow. The boy collapsed, his legs refusing to move. Then, in a deep voice, the director spoke. "Snow, damn it, what are you doing here?" Snow was special, so the director recognized him immediately. Wiping his mouth with his sleeve, the man began walking toward the boy. With each step, Snow's heart sank deeper. "And no!" The director picked up speed. "Don't come any closer." But he didn't stop. He knelt down and seized Snow's face with both bloodied hands, smearing the girl's blood across his cheeks. His terrifying, inhuman eyes locked onto Snow's. Snow could feel the director's bloody breath brush against his skin. Then, in that same guttural voice, the director spoke again. "You didn't see anything, did you, Snow Lionheart?" What? Snow hesitated. His mind was still struggling to process what he had just witnessed. "You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything." The director pulled Snow into a tight embrace, soaking him in blood as well. "You're an obedient child, aren't you?" Snow remained silent. He couldn't speak a single word. It felt as though the devil himself was holding him. "Answer me." The devil demanded a response. But the boy couldn't form the words. "Answer me." The monstrous roar shattered what little resolve Snow had left. Shaking all over, he finally replied, "Why, yes. Good." The director pulled away slightly. "Very good. Everything you saw tonight was nothing more than a nightmare." A sharp blow suddenly struck Snow's stomach. The boy's world flipped upside down. Just a bad dream. Snow fell unconscious on the floor as the director gazed down at him. That boy was too important to lose. They couldn't afford to let him die. Otherwise, it would have been him lying on that table instead of the girl. When the time came, he did plan to let the boy go. But that time hadn't come yet. Moments later, A familiar woman entered the room. The director had already finished devouring the unfortunate child and was now cleaning himself. When Annalise arrived, he gestured towards Snow. "Return him to his bed, and make sure you control him properly." "My apologies, sir. I didn't expect this child to break the rules. He's usually very obedient." Annalise bowed deeply. The director stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's fine. Just make sure it never happens again." "Yes, sir." They looked into each other's eyes for a long moment, before falling into each other's arms, consumed by their carnal desires. And beside them, Snow Lionheart lay motionless on the floor. That child had been swallowed by the darkness. Chapter 340. Snow Lionheart 3. When Snow Leonheart woke up, he found himself lying in bed. He slowly touched his face, then glanced down at his clothes. They were perfectly clean. Everything seemed normal, as if what he had witnessed had been nothing more than a dream, a terrible dream. But that trembling, that pain in his chest, that fear, it had been far too real. "I saw my world collapse before my eyes," Snow muttered as he hugged himself tightly. The image of the blood-soaked director still haunted his mind. The man whom everyone called father had been a monster who devoured the flesh of the very children who called him that. That truth alone made Snow consider running, escaping as far away as possible. But to where? They were prisoners in the place they called home. The dove on his pendant looked just like him. He was like that dove. A dove trapped inside an iron cage, with nothing to do but wait for death. With thoughts like those, the days went by. Snow Lionheart lived each one in terror, haunted by what he had seen. Children continued to disappear from time to time, as usual, replaced by newcomers. But this time, he knew their fate. Those children were either cut into pieces or eaten alive, each ending more horrific than the last. Knowing that, without being able to do anything, was a crushing weight for a 10-year-old boy. Someone could sleep in the bed beside him one day, only to vanish the next and end up on the director's death table. Speaking of the director, Snow's face would go pale every time he saw the man. And yet the director never acknowledged him again. Which made him wonder, had his time simply not come yet? The time of his death? A never-ending war of thoughts raged inside the boy's mind. Perhaps his only solace was the time he spent with Deputy Director Annalise. She was the only light in that dark place. She always hugged him and told him everything would be all right. But it was her next words that carved themselves deep into his soul. "Be a good, obedient boy and everything will be fine." Those words always brought him back to that day. The day that felt more like a dream than reality. As time passed, Snow managed to keep himself sane by forming new thoughts. "I'm going to escape." He would run away from the orphanage, from that hell. And I'll take her with me. The person he called Mother. Deputy Director Annalise. Snow wanted to save her. He wanted to take her away from that cursed place. And then, the two of them could live in peace, far away from all of this, as mother and son. The boy blinded himself with those dreams. Those sweet, impossible dreams. As he began to seriously plan his escape and what he would do afterward. It was a selfish decision. He would leave all the other children behind. But he wasn't a hero. Just a child. A child crushed by guilt as he watched more and more of them disappear, completely unaware of the fate that awaited them. He knew what was coming, and yet said nothing. It was almost as if he were complicit in their deaths. That was why he wanted to run, to leave everything behind. He knew that what was happening would leave a scar on him for life. But he didn't know what he was supposed to do. Especially when some of the children tried to befriend him. He didn't know what to say to them anymore. So instead, he focused. He trained in secret, honing his control over Aura, and little by little searched for a way out. He planned to take Annalise with him once he found an escape route, so he never told her about his plan. Not until the very end. The days passed quickly, then months. Eventually, Snow Lionheart turned 12. For 2 years, he built his escape. And for 2 years, an uncountable number of children died, children whose death Snow felt he had caused with his own hands. They were all gone, and he had known, yet he did nothing. Snow wondered often, why hadn't they taken him? Why didn't the director just devour him and be done with it? Why did he have to suffer in silence, carrying the burden of all those lives? True, he hadn't killed them, but he was a part of everything that had happened. Silence in the face of a crime made him no different from the criminal. Every time Snow looked at his hands, all he saw was blood. The blood of all those children. All the injections he had received throughout the years, changing the very makeup of his body. The strange environment he had grown up in. Snow could feel himself becoming something entirely different. Something not human. And finally, the day he had long awaited arrived. After 2 years of searching, planning, and training in secret, Snow had finally found a way to escape. He decided to go alone first, to see if the path was truly safe. If it was, he would return immediately to take the deputy director with him. So, late at night, Snow slipped out of bed and set off once more, hoping to find his salvation. After 2 full years of preparation, he had memorized every detail by heart. And with almost flawless execution, he managed to escape the orphanage. It was easy, far too easy. As if they were letting him go. What he didn't realize at the time was that those red eyes had been watching him all along. Once he found himself beyond the walls of Yosefka orphanage, deep in the forest that surrounded it, he felt a rush of freedom. Harnessing the aura he had trained so long to master, he bolstered his body and darted through the trees with speed. He wanted to run far, far away from that place. For a moment, he even forgot about the deputy director entirely. Freedom was something his poor soul had longed for far too long. So he ran, and ran, until his legs couldn't carry him anymore. He wanted to get as far away as he could. But thin threads still tied him to the orphanage. He felt like he had left so much of his shattered self behind. So even after he had crossed a great distance, he stopped. Be a good, obedient boy and everything will be fine. Annalise, the mother he never truly had, was still back there. He was scared, terrified of what he had left behind. His body and his soul, both had been stained by the filth of that place. Did that boy really have the right to survive? Alone? No, he couldn't. At the very least, I'll take her with me. And so the boy turned back. He returned to hell. By the time Snow Lionheart made the decision to return, he realized just how far he'd gone, blinded by that intoxicating taste of freedom. His aura had responded to his emotions, propelling him forward with incredible speed. So much so that the return trip took him several days. Only then did he realize how isolated the orphanage truly was from the world. And for the second time, he came to understand just how little he knew about what lay beyond it. About how vast the world really was. Everything he had ever known ended at those orphanage walls. He wanted to hurry back and rescue Deputy Director Annalise. Saving even one soul would be enough to ease the weight crushing his young heart. So after a long journey, he finally reached that place on a moonlit night, a night just like the one when he first discovered the truth. It was almost ironic. Snow Lionheart froze in place as his world was shattered all over again. Before him, beneath the wing of night, the orphanage burned, consumed by raging flames. A fire so fierce it lit up the darkness of the night. Snow found himself running toward the fire, searching for her, his only light.